Part 21. Big Marcus left Lumiere's building the night before Lumiere vomited his pixie and Cranford created his cat. At the time these things were happening, he was visiting Kimmy at his apartment where he and Pagan were resting together. Marcus's head was filled with the notions of putting a gang together to protect Wendy and the rest investment in the good business. Also, what was the hit app Dee Dee Moncler that Cuthbert mentioned? And he was trying to narrow down recruitment candidates in his head as he knocked on Kimmy's door. Marcus knocked, buzzing with ideas. Excitement, Kimmy answered a casual, "Hey mate, come on in, Ixwa," replied Marcus as he entered the apartment to see Pagan passed out on the couch with nature documentaries playing on the TV. "I got a bunch to get to you, Kim. We gotta start a gang to protect Wendy and the other oldies. She's gonna start a new synthetic drugstore and she needs a team, a gang, an army to defend it," exclaimed Marcus. All right, slow down, Marco. I can't remember seeing you this excited," retorted Kimmy, guiding Marcus to sit down. Marcus sat. "Also, Cuthbert's on some new business shit. He's doing fucking hits for some dark web apps. Sounded like something right up your alley with all your dark web browsing. Have you heard of it?" Dee Dee Moncler. There was a pause. Marcus could tell by the look of shock and denial on Kimmy's face and body language that he knew more than he was letting up. Kimmy stammered, trying to place his words, carefully unsure whether to unload the information about his recent assassin work. "Yeah, I've heard of it. Got it downloaded on my phone, but it's just some underground MMOC." Kimmy took out his phone and showed Marcus the MMORPG-like background that hid the app's slick AI interface for finding contracts, and prayed that Marcus wouldn't pry him on it any further.
"No, see, this is what Cuthbert showed me. You click that hidden icon in the corner and it's a whole different app." Marcus hit the icon. Kimmy winced and Kimmy's Diddy Moncler profile appeared, showing everything from finished contracts up for grabs, and even achievements. "No, see, this is what Cuthbert showed me. You click that hidden icon in the corner and it's a whole different app." Marcus hit the icon. Kimmy winced and Kimmy's Diddy Moncler profile appeared, showing everything from finished contracts up for grabs, and even achievements. Marcus furrowed his brow and looked up to the shook Kimmy standing there gawking, holding his phone. There was a flashing achievement on the screen which read, 10 contracts completed. Pagan was still asleep on the couch. Marcus was staring at Kimmy wild-eyed. He almost wasn't surprised. This explained Kimmy's sudden wealth recently, and it was something he could always peg for Kimmy to be able to do: contract killing. Marcus perked up and went to exclaim, "You're a proper killer, lad," and Kimmy shushed him, pointing to Pagan, who was slowly waking up. "I don't want her to know," Kimmy loudly whispered to Marcus, who had a huge grin on his face but simply nodded and whispered, 10 people, Kimmy. You're red hot. Cuthbert's only done like 2 and Lumiere started assisting people with suicide through it, getting paid the same. That must be the mercy contracts. Kimmy muttered and considered the fact he knew more people using the app now. He wasn't alone. I picked power when it gave me the option. Didn't know what I was in for, but now I've taken out a bunch of lowlives and some rich lowlives too. But they're all justified, right? Replied Marcus. Yeah, I guess so, said Kimmy. To be honest, they're starting to blur into one. But you should have seen the last guy got him with a gun drone mid-golf swing, cunt went flying. Kimmy laughed uncomfortably, divulging his secret to Marcus, also keeping sure Pagan wasn't overhearing them. Pagan was muttering in her sleep, "Daddy, I don't wanna hear the old stories again." In that moment she woke herself up, and Kimmy gave Marcus a look to no longer mention Diddy Moncler. "Oh, hey Marcus," she exclaimed with a yawn. Marcus laughed. "What are the old stories, Pagan?" Oh right, just some bullshit my crazy religious parents used to try to drill into me before I ran away. Something prophecy blah blah blah. Pagan laughed and Kimmy sat next to her and perked up. Hi Marcus, you remember our old crew tag GSK? Back in the day we used to spay that everywhere. Still a hard-ass crew name too, and this gang's gonna need a name, right? Yeah. What did that stand for again? Asked Marcus, excited but also confused. Fuck it man. Gorilla Squad Killers is what I remember, but I don't know Gory Street Killers. Global Syndicate of Killers? It all fits. What do you reckon? It's perfect, replied Marcus, and you're my first recruit lad, said Marcus, gesturing to Kimmy and then adding, oh and you too Pagan. The first two recruits. Yay! Shrieked Pagan. GSK, 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 she exclaimed as Kimmy laughed. Yeah, that's great mate. You know, listen, my mate Baker is a lad you'd wanna recruit. I'm serious. The kid's got an empire running all on his own. If you need foot soldiers, I mean, oh yeah, replied Marcus. Where's he at? Let's bring him in then. There's another lead Jera, but let's bring in Baker first then. Easy, replied Kimmy. Marcus called Wendy, who was in hysterics over Lumiere's pixie just being born, alongside the apparition of Cranford's cat, and was observing them play together alongside Lumiere, Cranford, and Davo. Marcus mate, you really need to get down here. There's well, things unexplainable, said Wendy as she answered the phone. Marcus answered, I'll be there soon Wendy. But Pagan and Kimmy are in now, and we've got a new recruit with foot soldiers on the way. And we've decided we're going under the name GSK. GSK? Does it mean anything? Asked Wendy, perplexed. Sounds hard. Replied Marcus, plus me and Kimmy used to write it as a graph crew ages ago. Right, well, as long as we're building something, I don't care what it's called, but anyway, do get here soon Marcus. Bring the two new recruits with you. Ready to witness something unexplainable at Paul's? Asked Marcus to the two excitedly. Let's hit up Bake first, Kimmy interjected. Yeah, for sure, replied Marcus, and Kimmy called the now 18-year-old meth dealer he bought his first gun from not long ago. Baker was having a barbecue at an outer suburbs rundown skate park with a crew of his underlings and workers. Bake was 18, but he was already running his crew amongst the older university students and high school students. He had drug running and gun running for him. Bake was from a minor crime family, so he could afford to be a little brash with power. Marcus, Kimmy and Pagan came down the hill climbing over dilapidated pieces of concrete. Bake and his mates were sat in a circle cross-legged, passing bongs and mixes around them. Bake exhaled a large cone as he noticed Kimmy approach. Gruzzy. Need some bullets, lad? Who's this then? Bake asked, gesturing to Marcus and Pagan. Pagan huffed. Who are you, little man? Poking Bake's forehead as he laughed. Kimmy interjected. Bake, this is my girl Pagan, and this guy is Marcus. We've got a proper business venture for Yaoyi. What's that? Laughed while packing another cone. Marcus went on to explain the good business storefront and GSK, along with mentioning Wendy, Lumiere, Davo, Cranford, and Cuthbert. Bake thought about it. So we get free synthetics, right? And whatever else this crew is producing, we'll help put it out in exchange for free dope and protection. Yeah, replied the rest of his crew. Something like that, replied Kimmy and Marcus. Listen, we've gotta get back to the building. Something big's happening apparently. You should come with us. Pagan puffed her chest out. Come on, big boy, she exclaimed. How could I refuse? Bake muttered back in awe of Pagan's presence. Harry, you look after things here. Bake ordered one of his subordinates, who agreed and sat back in the circle as the four made their way to Lumiere's building to witness something unexplainable. Part 22, The Cat, the Pixie, the Ritual. When the four arrived at Lumiere's tower, Marcus was still excited and raving about how Lumiere owned the whole building and how good business would emerge from the empty storefront below. Two of Bake's crew had tagged along to see what the commotion was about. Bake introduced them as Marcus drove in Lumiere's van with everyone in the back, no break being had from the bong circle amongst Bake and his crew. This is Darrow. Cause he's a hiep. Darrow was a 20-year-old engineering student in Bake's crew for some monetary gain, but he was essentially the grunt of Bake's crew, standing at 7 feet tall with bad acne and curly hair tied in a ponytail. An oversized billabong shirt and cargo pants with steel-toe slip-on boots. He looked like he could destroy anyone at Magic the Gathering while simultaneously acting as a bouncer for some elite club. Darrow sat quietly smoking cone after cone in the back of the van with Bake's end. This is Gibbo. Top lad, exclaimed Bake. Gibbo was a gaunt and skinny Middle Eastern guy, who breathed out his mouth, but seemed more twitchy than Darrow, more dangerous. Hi, exclaimed Pagan half sarcastically. Hi. Hi, the two retorted. Kimmy laughed. I wonder what's so crazy going on at Lumiere's, they can't even tell him over the phone. Kimmy gestured to Marcus. Maybe they're going to kill us, Pagan said bluntly into the air, and then began laughing maniacally and said hope not. The group arrived to Lumiere's looming tower and Marcus buzzed 1127. It rang through, no answer. Kimmy immediately buzzed a second time. It rang to the last buzz and Davo answered. Hey. Boys. Kim and Mark right? He stammered, we got new recruits. Exclaimed Marcus. Oh yes, very good. You'd better get up here. Bloody spectacle. The door opened and the group crowded into the elevator with Pagan pressing 11 and they ascended to Lumiere's apartment. The group arrived at Lumiere's door and knocked. After 2 knocks, Lumiere swung the door open. He was beaming, his teeth all gleaming in a wide intense grin. He seemed pumped and out of breath. More witnesses. Good. He exclaimed. Huh. When Pagan and Darrow and Gibbo both lurched back upon seeing Lumiere's eyes and teeth. Fucking Christ, what are you? Exclaimed Gibbo. Lumiere leaned into Gibbo's face smoking a cigarette and blew a plume of smoke in his face. Gibbo coughed. Well, I'm you. I'm all of you all at once. Right? Wait, no, what does that mean? Oh dear. This child of mine is getting in my head. Lumiere remarked, scratching his head. Your child. Exclaimed both Kimmy and Marcus. What do you mean? Show us, remarked Pagan softly and bluntly towards Lumiere. I will, he said, this way. Lumiere leads Marcus, Kimmy, Bake, Pagan and Bake's crew toward the largest rooms in the ornate opulent apartment. Bake, Gibbo, and Darrow were blowing out at the extravagance of each room. You know of the Rothschilds? Rockefellers? This shit seems that bracket, remarked Gibbo. Lumie's a kingpin, said Pagan with glee. Fair fucking dinkum, exclaimed Bake. Lumiere opened the 2 sliding doors to reveal Cranford on one side of the room, guarding a creature emitting pure light and auroras from its fur and calming long waves over Cranford and surrounds. Cranford was being overprotective of his iridescent cat, trying to keep it away from the ball of flesh covered in eyeballs with a huge circular mouth with needle teeth in rows darting around the room with 4 angel wings and landing back and forth on its one leg and human foot. Lumiere's pixie wasn't being aggressive, it seemed almost friendly, trying to frolic and play with Cranford's cat, but Cranford kept nursing it, paranoid. Would you look at that, my friends? We created a new life. Twice, we are creators. Lumiere exclaimed as he held up his hand and caught his pixie's foot, holding it by the foot and looking into its eyes. When it looked at Lumiere, every eye on its orb body focused on Lumiere, and Lumiere got a rushing sensation down his back every time he seemed to further bond with it. Pagan noticed the cat first and couldn't look away. She was in awe. She crumpled up toward the animal being engulfed in its light, sitting across Cranford. Cranford stammered, "She's pretty, ain't she? She is fucking gorgeous," exclaimed Pagan, holding up the cat and radiating in its light. It looked into Pagan's eyes with a knowing stare. "Where did you get her? Or him? Oh my god, I want one," exclaimed Pagan at Ugh. "Shut up, I can't tell you, it's a secret, okay," replied Cranford, whom Pagan stared down. "Cranford, can you do it again? Whatever you did. Please." Pagan bumped up her chest towards Cranford and made puppy eyes to him, and Cranford stammered, unsure what to say. Kimmy scoffed and Cuthbert walked into the room smoking a big joint that didn't smell like weed. His eyes were wired and bloodshot. "This ain't fucking real," he muttered to himself. Pagan turned her head from Cranford to be faced with Lumiere's pixie floating in front of her face, and she shrieked, "Oh god. Fuck me. Is this your baby, Lumiere?" "Looks like you," she said, remarking on its identical needle teeth to Lumiere. "It's my prodigy," Lumiere said as he held the pixie to where his heart would be. Lumiere turned to Cranford and said to Cranford, who was still nursing the cat, not allowing it to roam, "Let them play, Cranford. It's harmless, the teeth are just for show." "I don't know, it's just like that pixie thing looks like it's fucking designed to eat my cat," said Cranford, holding the cat to his chest, which it didn't mind. The cat was beastly careless, as if it had been alive for many years and knew patience is a virtue. Lumiere locked eyes with Cranford. "Let them play," he said in an authoritative tone, and Cranford let the cat go and went into a daze. The cat bounded up to the pixie like they were best friends, and the cat bounded around furniture trying to keep up with the flying pixie. "You alright, Cranford?" 5 minutes had passed and Cranford heard Pagan's voices, and it brought him out of the daze. "You were kinda out of it. I think Lumiere did that to you. To let the creatures frolic, I guess. He has powers, Cranford. Isn't that insane?" Cranford muttered incoherently, still somewhat affected. "Anyway, you got that cat doing some cult shit, didn't you? I can tell with that look in your eyes," asked Pagan. Cranford was unable to stop himself talking in response still too far of it to comprehend reality. He spoke, "Yeah, cult shit. A ritual. I copied some guy in robes I saw in the forest. He did it and fucking exploded. I tried and I got what I needed. Perfect, so we just do it again, no stress. I know a thing or two about the cult. My family are elders among the original church community. The cult is right there, about everything." Pagan laughed. Cranford was finally emerging from his daze. "What do you mean?" asked Cranford. "Oh, I mean it's just everything they predict turns out true. I've seen it. Even." Pagan gripped her brow and composed herself. "Come on, let's do this. I want a cat now, Cranny." Cranford chuckled at the order. "Alright, fine. Just us, don't tell anyone," he exclaimed in a huff. "Perfect. What do we need?" asked Pagan. "I've got everything here, but we need a sacrifice." Part 23. Milk. While Cranford and Pagan figured out what sacrifice to get for their upcoming attempt at an iridescent cat ritual, Cuthbert ducked out from the chaos of Lumiere's pixie and iridescent cat chaos-ridden apartment to take out a quick, easy contract on 2 low-life child predators, not elite high-status ones like Demetri, but simply 2 poor junkie pedo scums the world could do without, named Jimmy and Kippa, who lived together in a run-down, cockroach-infested abandoned crack house. Before Cuthbert arrived, the 2 were in the dilapidated kitchen having a conversation. "Kippa, mate, you've been shooting full cream milk by itself. That can't be good for you. Jimmy shrugs. I like how it feels in my veins. Kippa visibly recoils. Jimmy grabs a spoon, pours some heroin into it, then picks up the milk carton again. Kippa squints. Something's different. Kippa, hang on. That's 2%. His voice drops like he's just seen a war crime. Mate, this is too far. Jimmy, I don't give a fuck, Kippa. You saying I can't handle my drugs? Mind your own fucked up business. You don't see me walking around telling you how to be a fuckwit. Kippa, but Jimmy. You're lactose intolerant. But Jimmy didn't listen. He injected the shot into his black veins and for a moment seemed at peace before projectile vomiting waves of milk, blood and stomach acid, which Kippa didn't understand as he had only been shooting the milk, not drinking it. Jimmy crumpled and thudded to the floor, his limbs like a cockroach. Kippa, Jimmy, no. Kippa drops to his knees, watching his best mate self-delete in the dumbest way imaginable. Jimmy's eyes roll back. He stops moving. The apartment falls into dead silence, except for the slow drip of vomit and milk pooling onto the floor. A shadow moves in the doorway. Cuthbert steps in, exhaling smoke, his revolver held casually at his side. He scans the room, sees Jimmy already dead, vomit everywhere. Exhales. Cuthbert, oh good. It's just you then. Kippa looks up, confused. Cuthbert, shrugging, should have used full cream. Bang! Kippa's skull erupts, blood misting the air. His body crumples forward, face planting directly into Jimmy's milk puke. Cuthbert quietly left without a word, silently stepping over the dead bodies and chuckling himself on the drive back to Lumiere's building from this backwoods ditch of a suburb. Diddy Minkler notification, congratulations, successfully took out target duo. You have been rewarded $900, that's it. Cuthbert muttered figures, he said to himself as he parked back into Lumiere's garage to rejoin the crew and Pixie and Cat commotion having only been gone for around 100 minutes. Part 24, Iridescent Mechanism. Cuthbert arrived back as Cranford muttered to Pagan in a half-whisper so the crowd of Kimmy, Marcus, Bake, Cuthbert and Gibbo and Darrow wouldn't overhear. We need a pig. Like a little pig. Huh. Responded Pagan. Why? She asked. Cranford shushed her and whispered to her, I don't know why, but the guy in the woods used a lamb, and it didn't work. I went to the pet shop down the road and bought a teacup pig. That worked. Baker and his crew started noticing Cranford whispering to Pagan from the other side of the room as they gradually stopped staring at the supernatural creatures frolicking around the room. What happens to the pig? Asked Pagan, doe-eyed and confused. Oh right. Sacrifice. Well, if it gets me one of those cats, fuck that fucking pig. Cranford looked at Pagan and chuckled. Kimmy, this guy's comin' onto Pagan. Yelled out Bake to Kimmy in a teasing tone, seeing how uncomfortable Cranford was. Kimmy scoffed. Is everything alright, Pagan? He asked nonchalantly. Pagan looked at Kimmy knowingly and smiled. Everything's fine, doll. We've got a project. It's a surprise. She exclaimed. Kimmy looked at her puzzlingly and then looked back at Bake and off to the side and replied casually, oh good. I'm excited. Cranford stood up nervous and whispered in Pagan's ear before shuffling away. I'm going back to the lab with Truffle. He had named the iridescent cat. I'll get a teacup pig in the morning when the shop opens. Meet me at my apartment at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Buzz 724. He then scooped up Truffle, his iridescent cat, and sauntered out the room, being slyly side-eyed by Bake and his crew and perplexedly looked at by Kimmy. Better be a good surprise, said Kimmy to Pagan, Oh, it will be, I promise, replied Pagan. Better not be cheating on me with Meth Cook Hulk. Kimmy retorted, seriously. Mocked Pagan, gliding herself into Kimmy's arms. I'm just getting something I want, she replied, and it's not his beefy man beef. Okay. Alright. Responded Kimmy, having never really been entirely paranoid in the first place, as he held her beneath his arms and the pixie flew up to the two floating in front of them and shrieked, "Scree-ahh." When Pagan, Kimmy was visibly spooked. Bake and his crew laughed. Marcus, who had been quietly observing the pixie this whole time, went to Lumiere and asked Lumiere, "You're calling this your child? What do you mean? Where did you get it?" Lumiere laughed and caught the pixie again, holding it by the foot and admiring it. "I didn't want to worry anyone, but I had a bout of vomiting, for the first time ever that I can remember." "Ever?" exclaimed a few of them. "Yes, well, I mean Cuthbert saw. Cuthbert witnessed the birth, didn't you, Cuth?" Cuthbert scoffed and held his brow and muttered once more, since going on his Diddyman errands. "This seriously isn't fucking real," he said, almost with disdain, but more just unable to get grips with the supernatural creature. "At least Cranford's cat looked like a real animal." "You threw it up?" exclaimed Kimmy in a shocked and repulsed tone. "I guess so, mate. Yep, it came from me." "Immaculate conception, I suppose," meandered Lumiere, holding the pixie as it drooled, its tens of eyes all darting around the room in different ways, at least one at every other person in the room: Kimmy, Bake, Marcus and Gibbo and Darrow, the rest of its eyes either stagnant or beaming at Lumiere. Lumiere go of the pixie's foot, letting it fly around again. Gibbo and Darrow laughed like Beavis and Butthead. "Immaculate, he reckons," they muttered. "Got poisoned more likely, mate." "Never trust the agency," muttered Cuthbert on the other side of the room. As he did, the pixie focused all its eyes on him and flew on his shoulder. Cuthbert turned his head and scowled at it. Its eyes beamed at Cuthbert, and then it started ferociously licking his face with its long tongue. Cuthbert threw it off him, exclaiming, "Jesus fun Christ!" and leaving the room to his new apartment, muttering, "Fun gross pixie fun thing for fuck's sake." The room fell silent. Marcus quickly exclaimed to Lumiere, gesturing towards Bake and his crew now sitting down in Lumiere's apartment, re-establishing the bong circle, "We've got recruits, Lumiere. And a new name for who'll be protecting the shop and building when it opens. GSK. Oh, Wendy's shop, of course." "Yeah, mate, no worries." "Great. Have you met Otto?" "You know I have operatives working for me, but we're quite a skeleton crew. I rely on Otto quite heavily. You know I let Wendy move in because I thought I could take some weight off his back. As well as the rest of them. I can never remember the other ones, but now the floodgates have opened, the more the merrier." "What could go wrong?" "GSK. Lumiere exclaimed. Right. Way right. Great," exclaimed Marcus. "Maybe I can bring Otto in as well," he mused. Lumiere then turned his head and announced, "You know what, it's time we get some real tenancy in this place. Why don't all of you take an abode like my new friends Cranford, Dabo, and Wendy? Hell, they've only taken up 3 apartments on the 3rd floor. I have 8 floors of empty apartments, some decrepit, some brand new. Luck of the draw, I suppose. But take a look. You're all welcome. Otto will arrange it for you," he muttered while taking out his phone and texting Otto that he had even more future tenants. The group just stared at Lumiere, gobsmacked. "Free!" exclaimed Pagan. Lumiere nodded. The group started grumbling in approval. "You're a fucking sickant, mate." "Eats way!" exclaimed Bake, and Lumiere grinned a needle-tooth grin, sending shivers down the group's spine, and walked out, mentioning, "Try not to overdo it. Let's do it, Kimmy. Let's take an apartment." "We don't like it, you just go back to your apartment." "I'll go back with Macy." Yeah. I don't see why not. Kimmy replied. Jesus, exclaimed Darrow, that's the most demonic saint I've ever witnessed. Pagan arrived at Lumiere's building, buzzing apartment 724. She heard a grunt. Then a squeal. Her pulse quickened. Walking through the labyrinthine hallways of the 7th floor, she ran into Wendy and Davo. They were experimenting in the common room, surrounded by equipment. Pagan, you'd be perfect as the manager of my shop, Wendy said suddenly. You're tight, spunky, and energetic. That's exactly what I need. Pagan, caught off guard, agreed immediately. Then she stepped into Cranford's apartment. Total wreckage. A meteorite circle was carved into the floor. A doll hung above it, tied at the neck with an extension cord. Pagan froze. A flashback hit her. She had seen this setup before. People were burned alive. Multiple times. Her mother painting symbols on her with reflective chrome paint. The exact same symbols that were now carved into the floor beneath the hanging doll. Cranford's voice snapped her back. You ready? Yeah. He grabbed the crying teacup pig. Slit its throat. Blood poured into the meteor circle. The doll twitched. Cranford dipped his fingers in the pig's blood and painted symbols on it, instinctively. Pagan felt something take over. She stepped forward, her breath slow and steady. She dipped her fingers into the pig's still warm stump and, without thinking, painted 3 ornate symbols onto the back of the doll. The same symbols from her childhood. The moment the last stroke was completed, the reaction started. The doll gained massive weight without changing size, like something was pressing into reality from the other side. The ceiling cracked. The extension cord snapped. The doll thudded to the ground. Then sharp, iridescent metal shards pierced through its stomach. An aurora shimmered across the room, the same iridescence as Cranford's cat. Pagan felt a rush of excitement. She was almost there. But then something was wrong. The doll began to vibrate violently. Cranford jumped back, panicked. Fuck, what did you do? We're gonna fucking die. Pagan didn't run. She stared, unblinking. The doll stretched open, something pressing against reality from inside. Then it tore apart. Inside was a shimmering steel mechanism. It moved like a solar system diorama, spinning, shifting, symmetrical, an intricate series of interlocking 3D stars. Pagan's breath hitched. What the fuck is that? Cranford looked dumbfounded. I don't know, do I? Pagan stepped closer, staring at it in awe. Then her awe turned to fury. Where's my cat? She punched Cranford's chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. Cranford didn't respond. He was just grateful to be alive. Part 25, Kimmy's Existential Crisis. Kimmy was in his newly furnished by Otto and GSK members' apartment, laying in bed awake with Pagan slumbering next to him, watching news on a huge plasma at the end of their bed. The news was once again covering the sharp increase in homicides and gang violence and interviewing pedestrians about the matter. I just don't know how we can live like this much longer, a concerned citizen stated. Pagan began to stir and started waking up. Kimmy looked down at her and said, "Good morning, Starshine." Pagan looked at him, perplexed, a little disgusted by the sheer schmaltziness of what he said. Kimmy looked back at the screen and said in a slight sing-song voice, "The Earth says hello." Pagan stared at him in disbelief and went, "What the fuck?" "A lot of murders," Kimmy remarked at the TV. "Yeah," replied Pagan, a little perturbed, and stumbled out of bed in just her panties to get coffee from their now shared large ornate kitchen. Kimmy had been beginning to have an existential crisis. He had just realized since his last contract he had killed 13 people, an unlucky number if he recalled rightly. He was well on his way to receiving a second Diddy Minkler achievement badge which he didn't know how to feel about, so he went downstairs to Wendy, Davo, and Cranford's lab where Wendy was alone researching and asked her what she thought. "Well, what do you think of what I do?" Kimmy asked meekly with a mix of curiosity and concern. Wendy answered, "You're a murderer, Kimmy." Wendy
which is
replied
good for my
bluntly as
fight
she
because he can
organized
be
boxes. A shiver went down Kimmy's spine. "You're a murderer, for money."
which is
And
good for
what's
my
wrong
fight
with
because
that?
he can be
Wendy let the words stay in the air as Kimmy eventually went to stammer to say something,
which
but
is
she
good for
went
my
on.
fight because
A
he can
lot of
be
things, a lot of people would say, but this app,
illuminate,
it tells you why, it gives you
which is
motive,
good for my fight
takes all
because
the
he can
rhyme and
be
reason out of it. Wendy organized the last box and sat it down, and at the end of the day, isn't that all that matters? Wendy looked into Kimmy's ironically innocent eyes with a gleam. "All that matters, Kimmy." She sat down and relit a huge joint of the same plant matters Cuthbert had been smoking, her eyes widening and sharpening as she exhaled the strange smelling smoke. "Is that you feel good about what you're doing." She took another drag and exhaled. "You don't do it for anyone else or for your ego, you understand. You do it because you think. No. You believe it's the right thing to do." She took another drag, getting more wired and seedy. Similarly to how Cuthbert had been acting recently with every drag, Kimmy was unsure how to respond. "Right." Kimmy responded. "I think I get it," he said, sounding unsure. Wendy continued, "I mean, fuck kid, you think I give a fuck when you knock a corrupt CEO or Cuthbert whacks a pedo? Nobody cares, kid. In fact, you're causing celebrations in the wake of your destruction." Wendy exhaled a fifth drag. By this point her eyes were drooping and her face looked almost as if she were scowling at Kimmy as she was hunched over in her chair, but Kimmy knew she meant well despite her quick sudden speedy seediness brought on by her mystery plant narcotic. "What do I know?" Wendy exclaimed, now in a stupor from her mystery joint, turning to a microscope and looking into it. "Only been around almost 70 fun years, yeah, mutt. Go on, stop feeling sorry for yourself. Go fun kill people, if not for yourself. Do it for me." She turned her head from the microscope and looked Kimmy square in the eye. "Do it for Wildcat," she murmured unexpectedly sweetly, her eyes bubbling up with compassion and twisted wisdom and affirmation before she quickly started coughing an awful black, harsh cough from the joint. Kimmy knew the sentiment was just from the mystery narcotics, but he appreciated it all the same. "Thanks, Wendy, you've really cleared my head," he responded, trying to leave her in as much peace as he could as she spluttered violently. "NN no oof asterisk cough, worries mate asterisk cough asterisk cough," Wendy meekly replied as she returned to her equipment. "Better ask Cuthbert." Kimmy thought to himself, "that whack job'll have an angle that'll actually make me understand what the fuck I'm doing surely." Kimmy walked up a flight of stairs and knocked on Cuthbert's new apartment door. As Kimmy knocked on Cuthbert's door, he began to regret it immediately as Cuthbert swung the door open aggressively, obviously off his mind on the same mystery weed Wendy was smoking as his apartment stank of it, an unknown acrid, tinny, strong smell. Cuthbert scowled at Kimmy, his head bobbing, seedy and wired in a way only this plant gave off. "Marcus's mate, Cuthbert let out as he stared into Kimmy. There was a dull silence. Kimmy barely knew Cuthbert, but he felt some sort of looming animosity towards him from the middle-aged man. Kimmy knew he also operated for Diddy Minkler, so he suspected it might be something to do with that or his influence on Marcus, but right now he was looking for answers to his philosophical dread over the entire Diddy Minkler concept. Cuthbert snorted. "What you want, boy?" he barked. Kimmy stammered, unsure how to ask the question. "You do Diddy Minkler too, right?" Cuthbert snorted again and eyed down Kimmy. Cuthbert knew Kimmy had achieved more than him through the app he'd seen it scouring the leaderboards. Kimmy continued, I was just wondering how's it going for you I mean, what do you think of what we do? Cuthbert laughed wired and invited Kimmy inside to sit in a single dining chair in the middle of the room. There was no other furniture in the room apart from his mattress in a corner with no sheet and empty food containers and used paper plates all over the counters on the kitchen, and the room was flooded in makeshift ashtrays with various half-smoked joints of the mystery weed filling them. What we do? Cuthbert remarked to Kimmy, sounding fake shocked and sarcastic. Kimmy looked around the apartment, and as Cuthbert talked and stated, "A lot of ashtrays," Cuthbert perked up and snapped, "Don't interrupt. What we do? Young lad, Marcus's buddy. You don't do what I do. I was trained since childhood in the art of taking a life. The body that governs this country paid me handsomely for many years to do exactly that for them. Don't think you understand." Kimmy shrugged and asked, "Why'd you stop?" Cuthbert recoiled, his back re-snapping into place at the question, and took a moment to compose himself. "You don't know the world, kiddo. There's higher powers at play than you could ever comprehend. You don't know how to kill, you just know how to pull the trigger," Cuthbert said, and began laughing maniacally as he told on his mystery joint. Kimmy was unfazed by the statement, sat back, took it in, and stated, "First Minkler I choked out. So I don't know, I've done more than triggers." Kimmy took out his phone and went into the leaderboards and opened the search tab. "Hey, what's your last name?" Kimmy asked genuinely. Cuthbert swung his head back as he paced around Kimmy in the middle of the room in a dining chair and exclaimed with reverie to himself, "Benamerson. Pure Icelandic blood, I am the dash," he went on as Kimmy searched it into the leaderboard to show that Cuthbert was many ranks below him. Kimmy snickered to himself about Cuthbert's earlier jab and calmly said, "So you're like halfway to your first trophy, nice man." Cuthbert swung around again and scowled at Kimmy. He realized Kimmy had just entered his name into the leaderboard and found he was much lower in the bracket. Cuthbert scruffed Kimmy by the shirt and spoke venomously, patronizing, "Little shit. You couldn't handle a tenth of the shit I've done, you little ingrate." Kimmy quickly stood up and shoved him off, laughing, beginning to get a surge of adrenaline. "That's how it is, huh?" Kimmy exclaimed, and filled with anger and annoyance, and went to shove Cuthbert again. As Kimmy went to shove, Cuthbert effortlessly shifted Kimmy's body weight and force with a flick of the wrist like some sort of insane secret judo aikido move, and threw Kimmy in one motion out of his apartment and back in the hallway, sending Kimmy flying through the air. Cuthbert came up to his door and looked down at Kimmy with disdain, and before he slammed his door shut yelled, "Fuck outta here." Kimmy was in shock and sat by the door for a moment, and as he did he heard Cuthbert muttering to himself, "Lil shit thinks he's better than me. You ain't shit, you little fuck." Kimmy giggled to himself and stumbled back up and began making his way to the elevator to Lumiere's apartment. Cuthbert hadn't gone well, but maybe the demon man would have some insight with some finality. Kimmy entered the elevator and ascended to Lumiere's apartment, where the door was unusually left ajar. Kimmy knocked at it, opening it more, and went hello into the empty, ornate, ridiculously spectacular apartment. No answer. Kimmy entered and looked around with nothing else inside. It really showed the scale of his apartment's rooms and decor. Kimmy wandered around looking at the art and antique furniture and curios scattered throughout the apartment, a stark contrast to Cuthbert's. "Lumiere!" Kimmy exclaimed. "Hello." Kimmy kept wandering and began to hear the chirps and squealing of the pixie thing Lumiere had vomited, and he followed the noise. It led him to the back of the apartment, with the ladder to an attic section stretching down from the tall roof. It seemed almost impossible for anyone to ever be able to bring them down or back up, Kimmy thought to himself, but no matter. He climbed up the ladder. The shrill shrieks, chirps and squeals got louder, and he emerged into the empty attic room with giant windows overlooking the city taking up the whole wall and hardwood floors, with Lumiere sitting cross-legged in the corner holding the pixie by its thigh and foot, holding it up to his head and staring deeply and endlessly into its endless eyes. Every one of the pixie's eyes was contorting and writhing around disjointedly in all different directions, every iris changing colors like a party light machine in iridescent tones flashing wildly, and its tongue was sticking out almost touching Lumiere and rotating slowly as it at the same time calmly, slowly flapped its large angel wings. Kimmy observed the scene for a solid minute. Lumiere didn't notice him. He was locked in a full trance with the creature. His eyes were stretched so open the veins were painfully visible seeping into the seas of white on his face. Kimmy slowly walked up to Lumiere like approaching a sleeping wolf, unsure what was going to happen. He walked right up to Lumiere standing about 2 feet away. Lumiere still didn't notice as he continued staring into the pixie's spinning psychedelic flashing eyes. Kimmy looked at the pixie in awe for a moment and shuddered. He slowly reached his hand out to break Lumiere from his trance by tapping his shoulder. The second Kimmy's hand touched Lumiere's shoulder, Lumiere lurched to attention with a deep breath and in the same motion dropped the pixie, whose eyes all quickly went back to normal and into focus, staying the same color, and before it hit the ground it simply fluttered back up and began hovering around the room assessing Kimmy. It would seem the pixie hadn't noticed anything. There was a pause and Lumiere slowly and calmly turned his head towards Kimmy. Kimmy, he exclaimed almost warmly and kind of fatherly, and you know it's rude not to knock. Lumiere took his finger up to Kimmy's temple and tapped it, revealing blood coming down the side of Kimmy's head, and licked it off his finger and stated, "You're bleeding again." Kimmy was surprised and touched his head and realized it was from Cuthbert's throat. "Oh yeah. Just had a tussle all." Kimmy replied Lumiere as he reached in his jacket pocket and swiftly in 2 or 3 quick motions rolled a cigarette to Kimmy's amazement. "Sue, you're just up here with your pixie kid?" Kimmy asked, sounding a little weirded out. Lumiere stared into space oddly and remarked, "It knows things. Things gods couldn't comprehend." I would imagine Lumiere trailed off and chuckled a bit and let out a heavy sigh. Kimmy nodded along, glancing over at the creature buzzing around by Lumiere, and stammered, yeah, I mean look at it, right? It knows something for sure." Kimmy laughed and Lumiere stared into space, dragging at his cigarette. Kimmy cleared his throat. So I was wondering, you're operating Diddy Minkler too, right?" "On the Mercy Path," someone said. "How is it? What do you think of, like, you know what we do?" Lumiere looked into Kimmy's eyes with a mix of pity and detached concern and went on to say, "Honestly mate, I did it because I was bored. A bit of fun. We're just, or at least I'm seeing what happens with this thing Cuthbert's brought to me. This Diddy Minkler. Kuth was on the news, you know. Reporters wondering who he is. Thrilling. So now I bring people peace, as a hobby. I guess," is my answer, Kimmy. Kimmy scoffed a little and remarked, "That sounds a lot easier than what me and Cuthbert are doing, huh?" "Maybe," remarked Lumiere, "but I'm simply doing a service, and believe me you are too, but think. You get to have all that fun, right? Societal exterminator. Huh." Lumiere grinned his huge needle-tooth grin with wide milky white eyes to Kimmy, sending shivers down his spine. There was a silence, Lumiere still looking intently at Kimmy's eyes as he looked away. Kimmy awkwardly exclaimed, "Yeah right. Talking out tha Trish." As he said his last words he turned back towards the staring Lumiere, locking eyes with him, and suddenly wasn't able to move, in complete paralyzation, with all his thoughts leaking out his head, leaving only room for interpreting Lumiere's face. Kimmy stared into Lumiere in awe, who stared back, his teeth shining in the light. Lumiere could tell Kimmy wasn't happy with his answer to his existential dread, and as the stare continued, Kimmy became flooded with the feeling of realization with no answer to show for it, like he was having an epiphany, but it was empty yet still somehow filled him up like filling a car with gas. Chemicals flooded through Kimmy's brain, putting him into a daze where he could hardly make words. Lumiere smiled shrewdly and slowly directed Kimmy from the attic back out of his apartment like a wasted teenager, and Kimmy stumbled into the elevator and back to his apartment, out of it and somewhat brain-dead the whole trip down. He stumbled in and Pagan was now partly clothed, drinking a Red Bull, puffing a vape and looking intently at her phone as Kimmy fell into their bed. Head still bloody and out of it. "Jesus, what happened to you?" she exclaimed in shock, looking at the cut on Kimmy's head. Kimmy took a while to respond and eventually let out a Cuthbert. "Yep. Don't worry, it's all good," and he quickly fell into a deep sleep next to Pagan, who stared at him blankly and simply exclaimed, "Well, you're a lot less chirpy," and went back to checking her phone and her vape and Red Bull. Part 26. Research. A day had passed. Cranford's iridescent cat and Lumiere's pixie were settling into the building, their supernatural presence becoming just another part of life within Lumiere's growing empire. In the lab, the pixie perched on Wendy's shoulder, its many eyes darting between her hands and the machines surrounding her. Davo and Cranford worked alongside her, immersed in the experiment. Wendy plucked a strange fruit from the vines of a bamboo-like plant, its roots tangled into a pot wired to lights, bubbling chambers, and nutrient drips. "I think it's finally ripe." She turned the fruit over in her hands. The skin was rough and brown, textured like tree bark. Instead of peeling, it unraveled in thin layers, revealing a crystalline shell inside. Wendy pried the shell free, then cracked it open, watching as a pile of gleaming seeds spilled into a container. "Perfect," she muttered, staring at the shimmering contents. Across the room, Davo glanced up from his own setup. "I've done it, Davo. Come look," Wendy called, excitement laced in her voice. Davo walked over, peering into her hands. Wendy held up the crystalline shell, her face alight with discovery. The fruit wasn't the real project. It was just another of Wendy's side experiments. The real discovery sat in a thick, dark vial on the counter. A deep green liquid swirled inside a hyper-mutated opioid extract from a genetically warped poppy, forced into an unnatural state. Davo had been working with it for weeks, tweaking the synthesis, refining the potency. The drug was designed to be Lumiere's ultimate mercy kill. It worked by shutting down breathing entirely, but in a way that felt euphoric. The body didn't even realize it was dying. But they weren't done yet. Wendy had another element to add. She reached for a separate vial, filled with a variant of Meteor DMT Davo had recently synthesized. Davo's Meteor DMT was different. It didn't just send people into a psychedelic void, it hit like an instant K-hole, locking the user into an unshakable paralysis while their mind ripped through interdimensional static. When it interacted with the mutated poppy compounds, it overloaded the nervous system, making the body seize up, thrash violently, then collapse into euphoric shutdown. Wendy and Davo exchanged a glance. They had no name for it yet. But it was done. Davo was hesitant when Wendy volunteered to test the non-lethal version. "Wendy, we don't even know what a small dose does. I'll measure it exactly." "This is science, Davo." Davo sighed. "All right. But I'm monitoring everything." Wendy carefully prepared a needle, measuring out a precise, Controlled amount. She held it up. Paused. Then she had an idea. She reached out the juice she had just extracted the juice from the mutated meth fluid. A single drop. The moment the drop hit the ultra drug, the mixture reacted instantly. It started foaming, a slow, fizzing carbonation spreading outward like kombucha coming to life. The liquid turned a deeper, iridescent green, bubbling and hissing as the compounds fused together. The glass of the vial began vibrating, as if whatever was inside was expanding, adjusting, evolving to the unexpected combination. Davo jerked forward. That shouldn't be happening. Wendy stared at it. No. But it is. She didn't think. She just injected. The moment the drug hit her system, Wendy felt a lurch. Her vision fractured into shifting colors. She was no longer in the lab. She stood in an iridescent room, the walls pulsing like a living thing. The floor was glass-like, reflecting an endless void of shifting hues. A desk. Behind it sat an iridescent citizen. Not a monster. Not an alien. Just something else. It looked tired. Dressed in formal attire, its skin a swirling mass of translucent light, shifting in and out of human features. The being slowly adjusted its glasses. You're making breaches. Wendy blinked. She felt drugged but lucid. What? The iridescent bureaucrat sighed, tapping his long, crystalline fingers on the desk. These compounds, these interactions are not permitted for human traversal. It slid a glowing document across the desk toward her. The symbols on it shifted, impossible to hold in place. This is a formal notice of infraction. Continued use of these compounds in tandem with iridescent catalysts may result in corrective action. Wendy stared at it. You're fucking with me? The being didn't react. Your existence is already an infraction, it added. Tread carefully. She snapped back to reality. The iridescent room vanished. She was on the floor of the lab. Davo was leaning over her, worried. Wendy? What the fuck happened? Wendy exhaled, shaking. The pixie was still perched on her shoulder, its many eyes blinking rapidly, studying her. She sat up. It worked. Davo narrowed his eyes. What did you see? Wendy was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, brushing dust off herself. Just a trip. No big deal. But inside, she was rattled. Because it didn't feel like a trip. It felt like a warning. She looked down at the final mixture in the vial. It wasn't just a mercy kill drug anymore. She had accidentally created something else. Something too addictive. Something too easy to replicate. Something that, in the wrong hands, could spiral into a global disaster. Super Mega was born. And neither Wendy nor Davo had any idea what they had just unleashed. Part 27. The crystalline coin shimmered brightly in the sun of Malachi sparkling in his mansion. Malachi held it to the sun and it refracted the sun into a rainbow like a Pink Floyd album cover. Wonderful artifact you brought me, Seeker, he exclaimed as he walked back into the large foyer and addressed Seeker. He was a short man with no eyebrows or facial hair and a completely bald head. He would use hair removal cream on every square inch of himself twice a week, sometimes showing up to Malachi partly burnt or red. He wore a gray long-sleeve cotton shirt with a square collar and gray cargo pants with industrial hiking boots, and had the whites of his eyes dyed with an iridescent hue that felt unnatural, making his eyes seas of black with an eerie shine. Seeker nodded. It was found in excavation C38BK. Reported Seeker. Seeker held up a translucent drum bag. It was almost like he could see through it like an optical illusion. It was filled with various coins and small coin-sized 3D objects, the same crystalline material as the one he was holding, some coins being 3D star tetrahedron stars that refracted light perfectly. "Do you know how old this is, Seeker?" asked Malachi. "Genuinely I do not," replied Seeker. "I have never seen a bag of this material, and so deep in the earth." Malachi smirked, clutching the translucent bag. "These are over 100,000 years old," replied Marcus, gleaming at the bag. Seeker gasping, "From the old world. The connected?" he asked. Malachi sorted through the coins and observed the largest stamp on the biggest circular coin. It was a bust of Lumiere's face, grinning diabolically, his teeth and eyes shining through the coin on either side. "Let's send Lumiere something of his namesake," muttered Malachi. "We have plenty of his coins here anyway." Malachi laughed as he put the singular refracting crystalline coin in an envelope and gave it to Seeker. "See that this gets to him and his new crew tonight," said Malachi. "I'm on it," retorted Seeker, and grabbed the envelope and marched out of Malachi's mansion through a meadow and a large hedged fence to the bougie suburb Malachi lived in. Part 28. Cage match. The Black Ops-style butterfly knife shimmered under the dim lights of Shimmer Nightclub's back office as Jara held it up, checking the edge after sharpening it.
With a band on my
Satisfied,
got her
she
shooting
flicked
pigeons.
it,
I'm
gloated,
shooting
and
shots
checked
in
her
the air
phone.
like I'm doping pigeons.
Her Digimanipler app looked different from the standard versions. No deep yellow, blue, or red borders. Instead, hers shimmered metallic with an iridescent hue, shifting like liquid light. A baseball card loaded on her screen. Target: Martin Sable Bounty, $50,000 crimes, corrupt CEO. Report sexual violence. Money laundering through war crimes. Funded the deaths of refugees. Last seen, attending a private event at the top floors of a high-status business building in the theater district. A cage fighting event between two misused fighters. Jara exhaled through her nose, pocketing the knife. Malachi and Winston sat in a VIP booth, neon lights from the arena below casting a sharp glow across their table. Winston swirled his drink lazily, smirking at the fight. "Jesus, look at her try. She's swinging like a blindfolded kid at a piñata." Malachi sat silent, drinking his scotch. In the pit, two heavily pregnant women fought with 2-meter longbow staffs. Each crack of wood against flesh echoed through the venue. The crowd was rabid, virile. An old man in a tailored suit shrieked over the chaos, throwing cash into the pit. "100K," says the one on the left has a stillbirth. The fighter on the left was sobbing, panicked, barely blocking the attacks. Every third or fourth strike cracked against her head or stomach. Each time, she wailed not just in pain, but in fear for her baby. The fighter on the right wasn't hesitant. She wanted to win. Jara entered the corporate tower lobby, armed only with her butterfly knife. The guard by the elevator barely glanced at her. "You lost." Jara tilted her head, smiling. "My suitor's waiting for me upstairs." "You wouldn't want me to keep him waiting, would you?" The guard sighed, stepping aside. Inside the elevator, she waved a small device attached to her keychain over the key sensor, overriding security. The lift ascended in silence. She stepped onto the top floors, slipped into the bathroom, and climbed into the vents. Guards stood by the entrance, but she bypassed them entirely. She crawled out unseen, blended into the screaming crowd, and spotted Martin Sable near the back. Jara ignored the fight. She'd seen this kind of depravity before, elites throwing lives away for their amusement. The least she could do was remove one of them. Crack. The fighter on the right landed a brutal hit to the left fighter's skull. The woman slumped onto her ass, head spinning. Then her water broke. The arena went silent. A referee/nurse stepped in, checked between her legs, and grinned. "Looks like we got a birth, folks." The crowd exploded. Taking bets. Alive or dead? Alive or dead, the referee hollered. Money flew into the pit. Up in the booth, Winston chuckled, shaking his head. "Looks like we got a live one." Malachi stayed silent, just watching. The pregnant woman screamed through labor, while the other circled her like a predator. The birth dragged on for an hour. The arena swayed between rabid cheering and eerie silence as they waited to see the results of their bets. Jara didn't move. She was still behind Martin, waiting. Then the baby slid free. The mother collapsed back, exhausted. The referee checked, then grinned. Alive. Half the crowd erupted. The rest groaned, throwing losing bets on the floor. Then a pause. A hanging second of tension. And then crack. The fighter on the right stomped down, crushing the baby flat. Silence. The mother let out a blood-curdling scream, her voice ripping through the air. Winston winced, slumping back into his seat, unsure how to process it. Malachi furrowed his brow. Not in disgust. Not in shock. Just calculation. In that one stretched-out second of silence, Jara flicked her knife out and slit Martin Sable's throat. The sound of his blood hitting the floor was loud in the vacuum of noise. For a moment, no one noticed. Then the crowd erupted again. Not in horror. In cheers. They weren't screaming for Martin. They were screaming for the victorious fighter, the baby killer. The bloodlust was total. Jara slipped out unnoticed. Then someone saw Martin's slumped-over body. A shriek of terror cut through the cheers. Then another. Slowly, the celebratory screams twisted into chaos. The arena unraveled. Jara was already in the elevator. Outside, the doorman at the entrance raised an eyebrow as she passed. Good show. Jara lit a cigarette. Bit slow. She exhaled smoke and walked through the doors. Her phone vibrated. Congratulations, Jara. $50,000 has been deposited to your account. She flicked the cigarette away and made her way back to Shimmer nightclub. Part 29, Delivery. The night Winston and Malachi were at the cage match, Seeker approached Lumiere's building under the guise of being a friend of one of the new GSK recruits who had moved in. He held the coin envelope in his hand waiting to get inside the building. He overheard two of Bake's boys talking Gibbo and someone else by the front entrance. "Yeah, he's on the top floor, fuck knows what he does with himself though," exclaimed Gibbo. Bake's crew member retorted, "He's letting us live here for free." "I could care less, the whole crew's here now." The two opened the front door and entered in like a ghost. Seeker followed in behind them unnoticed and took a second elevator up to the 11th floor. He knew where Lumiere's apartment was from talking with Winston and Malachi. Seeker approached Lumiere's door and slid the envelope under it. As he skulked back to the elevator, the door swung open, revealing Lumiere, who spotted Seeker down the hall. "I see you, you know," exclaimed Lumiere to the shadowy figure. Seeker said nothing in a panic. and frantically waited for the elevator doors to open. "What's this?" said Lumiere, picking up the envelope. By the time he had opened it, Seeker was gone. Seeker went back to Malachi's mansion where he was getting ready to eat a baby, with a woman giving birth strapped to his kitchen table, screaming, being held down by disinterested goons who had done this too many times before. As the baby crowned out of the woman's vagina, Malachi poked its head with a large serving fork and yanked the baby out of the woman who had passed out in pain. And he would bite off the umbilical cord and eat it, and bite by bite slowly tear through the baby to just the bone in front of the waking up horrified woman who was his slave. Part 30, Fascist Drugs. Wendy looked at Kimmy putting a homemade wire crown on his head. As per his request, she began to speak. "So as you know, Kimmy, your thoughts have genomes." "Right," responded Kimmy, unconvinced. Wendy continued, "Now I need to channel the genome of the dictator. I need you to really be a Nazi down to your core and believe it just for a second." Okay, Kimmy replied meekly. Wendy had her hand by a switch and said, "With this
D.D.
genome, I
Montclair,
can
shade of
introduce
red
it
wine,
into this
vinegar and
plant.
water. No ozone generator for generating the petite manifestation. D.D. Montclair, shade of red wine, vinegar and water. No ozone generator for generating the petite manifestation.
Manifold benefits accruing interest in dissident infantically obsolescent maintenance
and flicked a
services.
switch that began electrocuting
Kill 'em
Kimmy,
all,
and he
kill 'em
shouted
all,
out,
kill 'em all.
"OGODD, I hate the Jews," with all his might.
Montclair
And
DD
Wendy
is he, be, she,
examined
kill,
the
take them.
interface and
Take
said,
them.
"Yes.
Kill them.
Good.
Kill them.
Good."
Montclair
She
DD is
stopped
he, be, she,
zapping
kill,
Kimmy,
take them.
and Kimmy
Take
exclaimed,
them.
"What
Kill
the
them.
fuck was
them.
that?"
Kill them.
"Good," said Wendy. "I have
Kill 'em
almost
all,
all I
kill
can
'em
get
all,
from
kill
you.
'em
Just
all.
1 or 2 more times, come on." Kimmy stammered, "Wait, what?"
Kill 'em all, kill 'em
Wendy
all, kill
slammed
'em
down
all.
the handle 2 more times to a fried Kimmy, who stumbled off with Wendy patting him on
I
the back
am
and
D.D.
saying,
Montclair.
"You get M, Tiger," as Kimmy groaned and went back to his apartment.
Blasphemy, final witness,
Wendy
Zero
continued
Lumiere
to do this
doesn't
procedure
sleep.
under everyone's noses to Marcus Pagan, Kimmy Bake, and a number of new GSK recruits. She had put out a toxic incense which she was immune to,
I
which
am
made
D.D.
people think
Montclair.
basic thoughts for every participant, which helped bring out the genome.
Kill 'em all, kill 'em all, kill 'em
Later,
all.
Wendy was watching a stalk emerge from her black writhing plant mass.
Kill
She
'em
had
all,
been
kill 'em
spraying with
all,
the
kill 'em
genome in
all.
liquid form profusely, causing the mass to convulse and shift,
Kill 'em
finally
all,
giving
kill
birth
'em
to
all,
a
kill
stalk
'em
of
all.
leaves all tiny, about 5 millimeters in
Montclair
diameter,
DD
and
is
every
he, be,
leaf
she,
was
kill,
a
take
fully
them.
formed and
Take them.
realized
Kill
basic
them.
dictator
them.
hanging off
Kill
the veins
them.
of the stalk.
Montclair DD
Hundreds of
is he,
them,
be,
all
she, kill,
making a
take
low
them.
hum of
Take
rhetoric.
them.
They were
Kill
babies,
them.
the first
them.
of their species.
Kill them.
A colony
Manifold
of fascist
benefits accruing
sentient
interest in
leaves.
dissident infantically
"Perfect," said
obsolescent
Wendy,
maintenance
"let's
services.
harvest," and she
D.D.
grabbed a
Montclair,
sickle and
shade of
carved
red
them
wine,
all
vinegar
off
and
the
water.
stem,
No
only to
ozone
evolve
generator for
again.
generating the petite
As the
manifestation.
sickle went
D.D.
through the
Montclair,
thousands
shade of red
little
wine, vinegar and
dictators, they
water.
all
No
screamed
ozone
for their
generator
lift,
for
but it was
generating the
no
petite
use.
manifestation.
Wendy dried them out in a dehydrator with Cranford, who was amused by their suffering, and then they grinded them down for a new high-end experimental product to be sold at the up-and-coming Good Business. Part 31. Lumiere Business. Pagan was walking through Lumiere's ornate apartment looking for someone to tell her what the iridescent mechanism made of some steel-like substance was, and to try and make sense of what might be going on. She walked up to the hallway, and there was a ladder coming down impossibly high from the roof. She claimed Lumiere was in the attic with his pixie laying beside him, wings curled up and eyes closed, seeming to be sleeping. He has just hung up a call and booted up an old Macintosh computer from 2003. It was huge, like an old computer. Pagan walked up to him and said, "Hey, can I ask you something?" And Lumiere went, "Oh, Otto just sent me some documents. I don't really do any work, but this is the one thing I do occasionally. The things they can't crack." "Oh right," Pagan replies, and look at the documents Lumiere was overlooking on the computer. It looked like it was incredibly compliant, legal, or something to do with global affairs and contracts, and he was signing off on world affairs she had heard about in the media. Lumiere did a few clicks and scurriedly typed out a big paragraph and clicked whoosh send, and he turns off the computer and turns to Pagan and says, "What's up?" And Pagan says, "Me and Cranford made something. With a ritual?" Do you know anything about that? There was a pause. Lumiere said, sorry, I don't really know anything about anything, but I can't check it out. Come on, said Pagan, and led Lumiere to Cranford's apartment, where the mechanism was leaving the pixie sleeping in the attic. Pagan opened the door to Cranford's apartment without hesitation. Cranford was sitting on his bed and jumped startled backwards into the wall when Lumiere and Pagan somewhat busted inside. "What you cunties want?" exclaimed Cranford. Truffle, the iridescent cat, had been curled up in the corner of the room and stood up, extending itself towards Pagan and Lumiere, looking at them with a gaze almost as if it knew they'd be coming. "Don't know how to knock?" he asked Pagan, annoyed and also flustered by Lumiere's presence. Pagan took Truffle into her arms and it rubbed its head against her, causing kinetic energy to spark on Pagan's hair. She laughed and exclaimed, "Oh, you're so big," to the cat. Cranford looked over at Lumiere, who snickered and gave him a big needle-tooth grin, causing Cranford to shudder. Lumiere gestured across Cranford's trashed little corner apartment over all the trash and towards a pile of newspaper on the ground, clearly hiding something glowing beneath that he noticed quickly and immediately felt a presence in his chest from the glowing light. "Heard you guys made something," Lumiere remarked to Cranford. "Yeah, Cranny, where's the metal thing? I'm showing it to Lumi. If anyone might know something about some cult shit, Mr. Demon Man." Cranford growled in disapproval at Pagan's actions and went off, saying, "Fuck, you dumb bitch. We can't go around telling people we're doing this shit, especially the guy who owns the fucking building. What the fuck is wrong with you?" Cranford paused and looked over at Lumiere, almost sweating bullets. Lumiere stared back at Cranford meekly and stated simply, "I really don't care, you know." He gestured to the glowing newspapers. "So that's it?" Lumiere asked bluntly to a flustered, stammering Cranford. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. We tried making another cat how I did before, but Pagan fucked with it and now we've made this fucking Lumiere cut him off and stated, "Trust me, Cranford. It's fine." Cranford gulped and Lumiere walked over to the newspaper that Truffle was now wrapping itself around, almost to illustrate Lumiere as to where to look, nudging at it with its head. "Where is it, Cranny?" exclaimed Pagan harshly. Lumiere grabbed the newspaper and threw it across the room, revealing the mechanism with its endlessly intricate spinning and coalescing parts slowly moving in perpetual motion by itself. Lumiere's eyes widened, the reflection of the mechanism shining in the white of his eyes. He made a noise similar to a flamboyant waiter being impressed by your meal choice. "Ooh, wow, Lumiere exclusive. Would ya look at that?" Cranford made an uncomfortable sound and Pagan laughed. "What you think, Lumi? What is it?" "You know right." Lumiere put his hand onto the moving mechanism, which made a loud, deep droning noise that shook the room. Lumiere
Blasphemy,
paused.
final
"No fucking
witness,
clue,"
zero.
he stated,
Lumiere
which
doesn't
deflated
sleep.
Pagan and made Cranford scoff.
Which is
"But
good
I
for
wonder."
him, because he can be at
Lumiere remarked and pulled
clubs
the
till
crystalline
closing.
coin that was delivered to him in an envelope with his face carved into it out of his jacket and observed it in the glowing light of the mechanism. Pagan walked over and looked at it and exclaimed, "Oh wow. What is that? Looks ancient. And oh my god, Lumi, it's got your face on it." Pagan gawked at Lumiere and the coin, astonished. Cranford had disconnected from the situation and was holding Truffle, telling it everything was okay while it stared at Lumiere almost excitedly and knowingly. "Yeah, it does. What it's made of? It looks like it might be connected to this thing," Lumiere said. Pagan looked at the mechanism and noticed a slot and exclaimed, "Yeah, look, it should fit in there," and pointed out the slot. Lumiere went all right then and slotted the coin inside, and the second he did, the mechanism began expanding from either side and warping, opening up like insanely intricate wings, and Lumiere fell to his knees, hand still on the coin, and his mind began being flooded with visions of iridescent planes of shifting light as he began drooling and his white eyes began looking more lifeless than ever. "Oh my god, Lumi!" exclaimed Pagan as she witnessed the mechanism expanding and retracting, holding Lumiere, who looked brain dead in a trance. Cranford stood up and Truffle came out of his hands and stood over Lumiere, looking at him with a wicked grin, and started making a weird half-cat half-human cackling sound. Jesus Christ.
The bar went back
Yelled
to
Pagan
normal,
and grabbed
almost in
Lumiere's
sync
hand,
with this.
holding the coin, and yanked it off with Lumiere still holding
bar
it,
went
and
back
the
to
mechanism
normal,
returned to its
almost in
original
sync with
state, and
this.
Lumiere snapped back to
5
reality.
minutes after ordering his drink,
Wow,
an
he
unexpected patron came into the
exclaimed,
bar. He was tall,
dumbfounded.
well in shape,
You okay?
well dressed, and had clean, long
Asked
blonde hair.
Pagan genuinely.
After a
Yeah.
minute or two of dead
Jesus.
silence due to the
You all
abnormality
right?
of this man being here.
Stammered Cranford. I just
After a
saw
minute or
something
two
new,
of dead silence
remarked
due to the
Lumiere.
abnormality
What?
of this man being here.
Exclaimed both Pagan and Cranford.
The bar
I
went back
don't
to
know,
normal,
but there's more
almost
slots
in
in
sync
this
with
thing,
this.
remarked Lumiere, admiring the shining mechanism and
Lumiere
looking at
grunted
his coin.
and kept
We
sipping
need
at his
more of
scotch.
these. I know it. Whoever sent this knows
man
more than
sat
any
one
of us
seat
about
away
all of
from
this,
Lumiere.
he said, referring to the coin. Right. Okay.
The man sat one seat away
Exclaimed
from
Pagan,
Lumiere.
excited on some progress to discovering
A
what this
deal
was.
had gone
Okay,
sour.
good, remarked Cranford, grabbing Truffle back. Now can you guys
A
get out
deal
of here?
had
It's
gone
not going
sour.
anywhere, he stated. No
Needed
worries,
to
mate,
get
replied Lumiere, clutching the coin in his hand and shaking
Lumiere
his arm
grunted
in
and
revelry
kept
to the
sipping at his
mechanism and
scotch.
walking out the room. Pagan stayed in Cranford's apartment and remarked,
It was one of his
that
workers.
was crazy, huh? To which Cranford replied angrily, fuck.
Lumiere
Get
got a
out.
text?
Get back to your apartment. Which she promptly did to tell
It was
Kimmy
one of
all
his
about what
workers.
had just happened. Lumiere had not really shown the rest of the crew
Lumiere
the crystal
got a
coin with
text?
his face carved into it before showing Cranford and Pagan, and realizing that the coin
Are you
fit
gonna take
inside
care
the
of
new
that?
sort of steel shiny thing that they had made. He decided to
Are
go
you
ask
gonna
his
take care
friend
of that?
Cuthbert about it, who told him exactly what his suspicions were. It's
The blonde man
Malachi,
got
I
up
know
and
it.
stood behind
He's trying
Lumiere.
to reel you in, and he knows I'm here, so I'll be the cunt to bring you in.
The blonde man got
Cuthbert
up and
retorted,
stood behind
scoffing and
Lumiere.
sniffing at the thought. So Malachi is your old
Are you
foster
gonna
father,
take care of that?
as well as a high-ranking member of whatever this
You'd better look after
agency
it, or you're going
is.
to lose your
Okay.
man.
Cuthbert sniffed again and replied, yeah, he's got a lot of jobs.
Do I know you?
He used to fun harvest my blood as a child to transfuse
You'd better look
into
after
himself.
it,
The
or
cunt
you're
is sick
going
in
to
the fucking
lose
head.
your
He
man.
believes he can extract youth from consuming and taking in children, Cuthbert
Do
paused.
I know you?
And I think he believes he can extract your
What do you see?
unkillable
What do
nature
you
too,
know?
just like he
What
tried
do you
doing to
see?
me and
What
probably
do you
countless
know?
others.
Lumiere sat.
Lumiere laughed, let him try. I mean countless have. I mean at least I'm pretty sure they must have. I mean that's how we met, right? Lumiere stared at Cuthbert, who was looking into the distance blankly, and exclaimed with urgency, right?
The drug dealers
As
dealing to
he
those who
was
can't afford their own
already
clothes
starting
or
to
neighborhood to
forget
sleep
how
under,
he
as
and
they use every
Cuthbert
cent they
had
have
first
from
met.
panhandling on smack
Yeah,
or crystal.
yeah,
Then the
right,
deal
of
is going to
course,
their
mate,
suppliers to go on
replied
poisoning the
Cuthbert.
world even
But
more.
Malachi
And then
is
straight back to
upper
Lumiere,
echelon.
who had all the
People
connections.
think
And
you're
5
a
minutes after ordering his
Rockefeller,
drink,
he's the
an unexpected
goddamn
patron came into the bar.
Illuminati, you
He was tall,
understand.
well in shape,
He's
well dressed,
another
and had
level.
clean, long. About 5 minutes after
Lumiere
ordering his drink,
pondered at the
an
coin,
unexpected patron
looking
came into
at
the
it
bar.
in his
He was
fingers,
tall,
and stated,
well in shape,
well, I
well
want
dressed,
more of
and had
these
clean, long blonde.
anyway.
About 5 minutes
They
after ordering his
managed
drink,
to
an
power
unexpected
some
patron came into the
machine
bar.
the
He
kids
was tall,
built doing
well in
some
shape,
cult
well
shit.
dressed, and had
Hit
clean,
for just
long
a
blonde.
second when
About
I
5 minutes after
slotted in
ordering
the
his drink, an
correct
unexpected
part.
patron came into the bar. He was tall,
And when
well
I
in shape,
did,
well dressed, and
I
had clean,
actually
long
felt
blonde.
something, Cuthbert.
The bar went back
Felt
to
something.
normal, almost in
Cult
sync
shit,
with this.
Well, you know I do know where
The bar
Malachi's
went back to
mansion
normal,
is.
almost in
I've
sync
even
with this.
reported to him there enough times that I have an idea
After a
of
minute
its
or two
layout.
of dead silence due to the abnormality of this man being here.
The man sat one seat away from Lumiere.
Lumiere grunted and kept sipping at his scotch.
Part
A
32.
deal
When
had
I gave
gone
Lumiere
sour.
his name, the rain was pelting down in the busy derelict city. Otto Foster, 6 years old,
was one of his
alone in the
workers.
street, hiding from adults and authorities trying to find him in whatever abandoned
It was
building
one
he
of his
could
workers.
find. He couldn't stay in the orphanage any longer, the place where they beat
Lumiere
him,
got a
underfed him,
text?
and taunted him for his lack of love.
Lumiere got a text?
He couldn't stay in the orphanage any longer.
the place where they beat
Are
him,
you gonna
underfed
take care
him,
of
and
that?
taunted him for his lack of love from parents who never wanted him and
The
gave him
blonde
up
man
as
got
an
up and
infant at
stood
birth
behind
at the
Lumiere.
orphanage's doorstep, no trace of identity and never to return.
Do
The
I know
nuns had
you?
forced Otto to sleep on hardwood floors and eat nothing but gruel as punishment for a
Do I
series
know
of
you?
trumped-up minor inconveniences Otto had caused trying to
You'd
stand
better
up
look
for his
after
fellow
it, or
orphans,
you're
and they
going to
thought he was
lose
paying
your
the price.
man.
But Otto defied the evil nuns
You'd
of the
better look
orphanage
after
one
it, or
final
you're
time.
going to lose your man.
At 6 years old, Otto scaled down a brick building from a second-story window using tied-together sheets tied to his bedpost that he shimmied down to the outside talc brick enclosure. Before raising any suspicion, he began scaling a gum tree that's branches hung over the brick walls. After an hour of labored climbing, jumping up intermediate branches, occasionally falling and landing on the hard dirt and roots of the tree and winding himself up. Couple times in the dead of night he made it to the branch hanging over the brick and climbed over, dangling from it like a monkey bar at least 5 meters off the ground. Without hesitating, Otto would let go and instinctively tuck and roll as he landed, managing to get away with a few grazes and sores rather than broken bones, and then he ran. The orphanage was deep in a semi-outer, terrible slum of the city, filled with low-lives and bad types. Otto had packed a small 2-inch kitchen knife he had preemptively stolen secretly from the kitchen of the orphanage the night before escaping under the evil nuns' noses. As 6-year-old Otto walked the grimy streets in the dark early morning hours of his escape, he clutched that kitchen knife
Buy
in his hand,
Blasphemy
tightly
Final
holding
Witness
it so
0
the blade
Vol.
was
1
hidden under his
Edition 1
sleeve, but
imprint
ready
now.
to use to protect
Buy
himself at a
Blasphemy
moment's
Final
notice.
Witness 0 Vol.
Otto
1
ran through
Edition
the
1
streets
imprint
searching for a
now.
hiding spot. After successfully managing to run for a solid 3 to 4 hours, the sun now almost coming up, spreading a dim light of dawn over the grimy, putrid section of the city he was in. He found an abandoned school that night and wandered inside thinking he was safe, and began drinking from an exposed tap by the empty abandoned school pool filled with cracks, vines, and gubbery, yet the tap still operational. He overheard something coming from inside the building.
Big things.
Fucking hell, Kippa looks like a lil beauty, fell straight into our laps. Otto swung around, nervously clutching his kitchen knife tighter, remaining to it hidden under his sleeve, searching for where the voice came from, and then he saw the silhouettes of 2 tall, dangling men licking their lips and eerily trudging towards the outside door to where Otto was hiding. Ah yeah, Jimmy, look at that, a perfect little treat just for us, said the other silhouette's voice, opening the outside door, revealing the 2 ugly, lanky, sickly-looking junkies who had been staying inside the abandoned school Otto had fled into the outside pool of. Otto didn't know what they meant, but he knew he was in danger. He knew he wasn't a little treat to be used and consumed. Hang on, Kippa, before we enjoy our little blessing, let me re-up 1 second, said one of the men standing at the open doorway. Oh, nah, mate, of course. Go ahead. Quickly now. We don't want him to spoil. Otto was almost paralyzed in fear, unable to move for a moment, but he stood his ground, 6 years old, staring down the lanky, junky predator standing across from him in the pool in the doorway. Otto reaffirmed his grip on his little 2-inch kitchen knife, studying his breath, remaining calm. He was in the bowl of the pool. If he tried to climb back up now, they'd catch him before he'd be able to escape. Otto gulped and took a defensive stance. One of the men grabbed a 2-liter bottle of sour milk, as they had nothing to refrigerate it with, pulled a used syringe out of his pocket and extracted a giant shot of rotten milk, and quickly shoved it harshly in his arm and injected it, having convulsions momentarily. All right, Kippa, all done. Now let's play. The 2 began laughing eerily in a sick, sinister way as they stalked across the abandoned yard and climbed down into the empty pool bowl and attempted to corner Otto.
Otto still kept his blade hidden under his sleeve. The predators, Jimmy and Kippa or whatever they were called, hadn't noticed him clutching it, getting ready to stand his ground and defend his innocence. Kippa and Jimmy stood other side of him getting ready to pounce. "Yes, let's play," the other one said, about to try and grab Otto. Otto let out an innocent childlike tone and asked, "Mister NMRWHWH, what do you want?" "I don't think I want to play with you guys." Otto made puppy eyes towards the sick adult men, but it was an act. Otto was ready. Kippa lunged to grab Otto from behind him, and as his arm was about to grab Otto's clothes, Otto revealed the knife, clutching it like the killer from Psycho, stabbing into the shower, and dodged Kippa's advance and grabbed his hand and plunged the knife down with all his force like a guillotine into his hand over and over, and as Kippa lurched back he began plunging the 2-inch kitchen knife as many times into his thighs and side as he could, screaming, "Die pedo, die, die, die." Kippa crawled backwards on his hands and knees begging for mercy. "Kippa. No, don't die on me, mate," Jimmy shouted, running to Kippa's side. He looked up at 6-year-old Otto covered in Kippa's blood, panting from the amount of stabbing he had just done. Jimmy barked with venom in his voice, "You little fuck. Come here," and lurched towards Otto, and Otto swung his blade as hard as he could across Jimmy's face, slicing it open. Ah, fuck, oh god. Jimmy fell back, clutching his face, lying alongside Kippa, who, while not mortally wounded, was writhing in pain. "It's all right, mate. I'll sort us out, don't you worry," Jimmy said, and pulled the rotten milk out of his pocket and began filling up 2 huge syringes while weeping in terror and pain. Otto took his cue and ran out of the abandoned school back into the city, stopping in the park to change into the only other set of clothes he had in his small rucksack, at least not covered in blood. The sun was beginning to rise and shined beautiful, unforgettable lights on the city streets. Otto had managed to make his way out of the more derelict part of the city after running miles and was panting, trying to catch his breath, looking for a place where authorities might not find him. It wouldn't be long before his evil nun caretakers would realize he had run away. The sunrise was incredible this particular morning and gave Otto a warm feeling of survival and renewal in his heart somehow, even amongst the chaos. Otto tried entering any building he could in a district full of huge towers soaring into the sky and frantically trying to open locked doors. He did this until the sun was almost up, until he finally found a door in the street of random storefronts, residential towers, and various buildings that would open. A strange, slightly decrepit, huge tall tower that looked the most out of any of them, like there was no chance of it opening, but for whatever reason it did, and Otto stepped inside, the door locking itself behind him, keeping him safe. Otto tried to open the door once it closed behind him, but it was deadlocked. But at that point he didn't care. In fact, it made him relieved nobody could follow him inside, especially Kippa and Jimmy. The room was an expansive but empty lobby with 2 doors either side, an elevator with staircases leading upstairs. Otto was hungry. He tried to use the elevator, but the button didn't respond to him when he pressed it, so he quickly decided to walk up the right staircase to look for food. There weren't many windows and no lights were turned on in the lobby, so the light barely spilled onto the cream marble flooring and bone-colored walls, but the light colors made it easier for Otto to see in the dark. Venturing up the stairs, he noticed that the building was completely abandoned, but hadn't been trashed or vandalized. He saw no graffiti or signs of people, just a lot of cobwebs, and heard the occasional scuttle of rats hiding from his presence in the building. It seemed like the rodents that occupied this building were not used to any human presence, and Otto walking through really sent fear into them. Otto kept venturing through long hallways with cracking paint coming off the walls and a strange smell, not musty, not bad,
Blasphemy,
but the air was thick,
final
almost
witness,
like he was
0.
inside a cave system
Blasphemy, final
spelunking.
witness,
The air
0.
had not been breathed in a
I could
long
make
time.
you a
Otto
very,
climbed up several
very
more
happy
flights
man.
of stairs and made it to a large
I could make
auditorium
you
room completely stark
a
and empty.
very, very
He was panting
happy
and
man.
exhausted and explored behind the curtain into the green room and
That's
saw an ornate,
blasphemy.
incredibly comfortable looking lounge. He figured he was on the 5th floor and decided to rest here for a while. It was practically pitch black, but his eyes had adjusted to the darkness. He wiped off the dust and lingering cobwebs on the lounge in the green room and quickly fell asleep in his only pair of clothes, his hands and arms caked in predator blood as he dozed off. When he awoke, he opened what he realized were thick blackout curtains to the outside world and realized the sun was going down now, and the sunset was just as intoxicating and surreal as the sunrise that appeared when he entered the building. Otto paused and took it in for a moment, finding a brief solace in its beauty through the large smudged windows, despite his growing hunger pains. Otto kept climbing up a new spiral staircase coming from the green room till he made it to a separate elevator. This one seemed to work when he pressed the button. Otto hadn't even used an elevator before this point ever in his life and was working purely off instinct. But the doors opened and he went inside and instinctively pressed the top button. He figured, if he couldn't get out, if he couldn't find any food, he was at least going to get a view. The elevator ascended floor after floor till it reached the top level, and Otto stumbled out into a long dark hallway and followed it to a door to a penthouse suite that had been left ajar. But unlike the rest of the building, the insides of this part of the building seemed strangely not abandoned. Wandering through this huge ornate apartment, Otto made noises of shock and ahuoeagwat. He stared at the cherub fountain in the center of the room and drank from it, finally alleviating a terrible thirst he had acquired from exploring this building the whole day with nothing to drink. As he drank, the crystal clear water taking it in like nectar, a strange tall lanky man with white hair, completely white eyes, and razor-sharp needle teeth, wearing a trench coat, a torn button-up white shirt, black tight pants with no socks, and cheap black what looked like Converse or Volleys shoes, similar to the shoes Otto was wearing, entered the room. "You look lost," said the man, seeming both unsurprised and bemused by his presence, but not annoyed, concerned or angry. He didn't seem to have a care in the world, like he had just walked in on a stranger who had joined his fire circle at a hippie music festival. But Otto was still intimidated, worried, and scared, probably mainly by his sheer demonic presence, as he was a human form but clearly not at the same time. Otto stood his ground and fished for his knife in his pocket and clutched it. The man raised an eyebrow and spoke calmly. "Oh, a knife is it? Well, go on. Show me what you've got, little man. I'm curious." Otto panicked. He didn't know if he was in danger or not, but wasn't going to take a risk after Jimmy and Kippa. He positioned the knife in front of himself, ready to stab, and charged at the man without thinking and planted it into his stomach, adding another tear to his shirt. The man gracefully fell onto the ground, now sitting, with Otto on top of him, stabbing repeatedly over and over at his torso, chest and neck. The man began chuckling lightly. No blood came from any of the stabs. Every stab Otto had made had instantly sealed itself, and the man was grinning, a huge crooked needle teeth grin staring into Otto's eyes with his empty white milky seas he had in place where his pupils and irises should have been. "You sure are feisty, huh?" the man said, and easily picked Otto up off of him by the nape of his neck and placed him on the ground in front of him as he stood back up. Otto was panting, flustered, and didn't know what to do. He felt his stomach and heard it grumble loudly, as did the man. He couldn't bring himself to look at the man's demonic face, but he stammered the only thing he could think to say. "I'm hungry," he said, and dropped the knife, beginning to sniffle and trying to hold back tears. "I see," said the man, almost sounding curious. "Well, I don't eat much. It's a nice pastime, but I don't have much use for it, you know." He looked at Otto, who begrudgingly turned his face to meet him, trying to keep a straight face, but tears now forcing themselves down his cheeks as he maintained his child but still strong composure. "Wait here. I'll make you something," said the man, and led Otto to another room, like a decadent living room with a huge TV. He turned the television on, which had just started playing the 7 o'clock news, and he said to Otto, "I'll be back. Wait here," and the man skulked out of the apartment and down a set of elevators as Otto sunk into the furniture, taking in the artwork splayed around the room and beginning to let his guard down and try to make sense of the evening news with his traumatized 6-year-old mind. The newscaster was making a report on the exact suburb he had just had to wander through escaping his orphanage, and describing the horrors that happened there, saying it was still overrun with ne'er-do-wells and was a zone occupied by the hippie factions, where even no police dared to go in fear of being killed. Otto thought to himself for the first time just how fucked up his orphanage must have been if it was situated in this suburb. About 30 minutes later the man stumbled back into the apartment, holding a grocery bag, and walked through the living room into the huge ornate kitchen, remarking to Otto as he walked, "Come on." Otto got up and followed the man to the kitchen. He still hadn't said a word to him apart from "I'm hungry." The man began talking. "It's nice to have some company, child. I honestly can't remember the last time another soul was in here, or even the last time I had to leave," he said as he effortlessly rolled a cigarette with one hand and emptied the food onto the counter with the other, lighting the cigarette as Otto began to drool at the concept of food. "I honestly don't need to cook. I don't need this kitchen or what it can do for me, but being able to ace a recipe is fun and passes the time as well as tastes nice. Although I always seem to forget what I've learned how to prepare, but anyway, here's what I know at the moment." Otto took a seat at the kitchen table and observed the man's stomach still growling, but now set at ease and calm, and strangely curious of the way this demonic stranger seemed to operate. The man grabbed a saucepan, filled it with water, and flamboyantly slammed it onto the cooktop as he simultaneously lit the cooktop. Otto chuckled at the act. The man salted the water and did the same thing on a second cooktop with a frying pan, turning on the heat and slamming it on in one motion. As the water began to boil and the pan began heating up, he grabbed a kitchen knife. All of his utensils and cooking tools seemed to be of the highest quality, Otto thought to himself as he compared them to his piece of shit kitchen paring knife he'd stolen from his orphanage. The man used the knife to slice open a deli packet of guanciale and swiftly and effortlessly cut them into cubes and tossed them into the searing pan. Otto didn't know what it was. The closest he'd eaten was bowline meat if he'd been obedient at the orphanage as a reward, but he knew he liked the smell when it sizzled and hit the pan. He began to become excited with anticipation for what this man was preparing. The man simultaneously tossed fresh pasta from a separate deli bag into the now boiling salted water and then grabbed a big chunk of pecorino cheese, which Otto didn't recognize either, but also enjoyed the smell as the man repeatedly grated the whole chunk into grated cheese in a few quick rapid motions, and then grabbed a bowl and took out a box of eggs and stood over the sink, transferring the yolk from the whites of 7 eggs quickly and effortlessly and tossing them into a bowl and mixing them with the grated cheese with a fork he grabbed from a drawer. He stirred fast like a demonic machine and it quickly turned to a smooth sauce. The man turned the heat off the fatty meat sizzling and drained the water from the pasta, and in one motion mixed the egg yolks and cheese with the fried meat and pasta and began stirring, and he gradually introduced a small amount of the salty water left in the saucepan as he did. A delectable smell filled the room, and Otto was holding back tears as the man transferred the whole dish, an ungodly amount of cheesy meaty pasta, into a big bowl and planted it in front of the boy. The man also fished through the shopping bag and pulled out a couple ice-cold cans of Coca-Cola and placed them next to the bowl in front of Otto. Otto had never been allowed Coke and was unbelievable amounts of elated, a kind of feeling he'd never thought he'd be able to feel. He stared dumbfounded at the meal the man had swiftly prepared for him in minutes in a few motions and grabbed a can of Coke, unsure how to open it, shaking from the seemingly unwarranted compassion this man was giving him for no real reason apart from him being in the same space he occupied. The man opened the Coke can tab for the boy and placed a fork in his hand and said go on, grinning a horrifying needle-tooth grin with empty white eyes, but Otto now took it in and he looked at him and felt nothing but gratitude and began to scarf down the pasta and take his first sips of soft drink. And burped loudly as he powered through it and got woozy from the sheer amount of pleasure he was experiencing eating food like this and drinking something this sugary and carbonated, as he'd never experienced such a thing. The man chuckled. To him, this whole act seemed almost done just for his own amusement, to watch how much it affected Otto to finally receive some clearly needed compassion. Otto slammed the about a kilo of cheesy meaty pasta and skilled 4 cans of ice-cold Coke, and muttered the first thing he'd said since he stated I'm hungry, and stated genuinely and unsure of how to say without feeling defenseless thank you. The man chuckled and went, as Otto in turn passed out and fell off the chair, passing out into a food coma, and got caught by the man who carried his small body and placed it onto a large lounge with a blanket. And continued to smoke, seemingly unfazed by the whole thing, and took up a seat and began watching the news. Part 33, GSK Didimankler Operatives. A day's work. The days had been stretching past for Cuthbert. He spent most of his time strung out on the meth plant weed that Wendy had begun harvesting. He had a pillowcase full he managed to sneak under her nose when he realized he had a taste for it. He really wanted to try the fruit, but even Wendy herself kept that strictly for super mega production, as it was a vital catalyst to synthesizing the drug. Cuthbert tried smoking the small amount of super mega he managed to nab from Wendy, but he found that it just made him spacey and he didn't have nearly enough, and he wasn't the type to inject and wasn't going to start now. The effect it did give him, he noticed, felt reminiscent of being on a single tab of acid, except the trip was purely dedicated to making the shine on anything he saw be much brighter than normal, revealing a spectrum of iridescent colors. Wendy had warned Cuthbert not to go fucking around with super mega not long after her and Davo had synthesized it, which Cuthbert thought seemed strange. Would she not want to get it on the market as soon as possible to give the public a taste? Cuthbert could tell she was hiding something, keeping a secret between her and Davo about the new drug, but he didn't pry as he was already under suspicion from her for regularly trying to pillage their lab for narcotics to take and sell for himself while she wasn't looking, and their relationship had grown increasingly sour. Cuthbert opened the Didimankler UI. He still hadn't completed many contracts since the boy, only a couple. He was too paranoid the same thing would happen somehow and an app on his phone would force him to snuff out another kid. But Cuthbert opened the leaderboard and scowled at Kimmy's position and rank. It called him an AUG elite user, because he'd been on the app since early on, before Cuthbert had even been shown the app by Winston, and he had multiple achievement badges. Cuthbert scoffed. He just wanted to bring some money in on his terms. Since Marcus had started becoming obsessed with this upstart gang he was making with Wendy and the rest to protect her shop, he hadn't been checking in to work for Cuthbert, which raised alarm bells in his head. Cuthbert decided the perfect way to clear his head was to take on a contract, something lucrative, and he was gonna squeeze everything he could out of it. Cuthbert scoured through the contracts. The app was constantly updating and shifting how it worked slightly every other day, and Cuthbert hadn't opened it in a few days, and was struggling to understand the new system of color-coded targets and higher payouts for more deserving kills. He found what he was looking for, a used sports and luxury car salesman using his business as a front for human trafficking. Cuthbert accepted the contract, and a timer set for 4 hours appeared on the screen. "Oh fuck," he stammered to himself and composed himself and took the elevator down to the garage, quickly arming his trusty .38 Beretta under his sports coat over his high-end polo. Lumiere had a lot of cars and motorbikes he never seemed to use. A lot of them seemed in pristine condition from over half a century ago. Cuthbert walked over to a brand new Ninja sports bike, went and found the keys in the garage drawers and took off toward his target, who was about 2 hours away. He had to be quick as he knew failure to complete his contract would lead to getting flagged and not being able to use Diddy Minkler at all. Cuthbert wondered to himself as he drove whether he needed to bother with any of this. Lumiere was clearly much wealthier than he ever let on and in control of a lot more power than he'd ever admit or realize. Cuthbert could just coast in his building indefinitely, hoping to God the agency wouldn't get on his back to double-cross Lumiere or try and bring him to Malachi. Cuthbert was dreading that call as inevitable as it seemed. He was in debt to the agency, Winston, and Malachi. Despite loathing everything they represent, but at the same time he was certain Malachi was trying to start something with Lumiere, some sort of escalation, especially now that a gang comprised of more than that Auto Kid and his skeleton crew was living in his building. Just with the Bake Kid and his little minions, the building already felt bustling in comparison to how many of them there were before, and Marcus was only intending on expanding. Cuthbert was convinced that whatever that coin that was delivered to Lumiere really was, it was an invitation from Malachi. Cuthbert was certain of it. He knew his tricks too well. It was an invitation to fuck around and find out, and with how enamored Lumiere had become with the coin since seemingly finding a use for it, it looked like it was going to happen, and it was all going to rest on Cuthbert's shoulders, because he was the only one who had a clue where to go. How to get there and what to look out for. Malachi's mansion in a bougie suburb in the hills, but currently that was neither here nor there. Cuthbert sped down the roads following the map on the Diddy Minkler app and made it to the used luxury car lot and rental place and sauntered inside, very ready to kill someone and squeeze out everything he could. When Cuthbert sped into the luxury car lot, it was just about to close, and Cuthbert did a burnout into the parking lot at the back of the shop, took off his helmet and looked at the Diddy Minkler app and saw his target was 25 meters away in the back of the building. He looked at the baseball card on his phone. It read Aiden Maris, 27 years old, human trafficking, money laundering. Aiden looked like a clean cut, put together but also privileged, and as if he hadn't worked for anything in his life, like a trust fund baby jock looking after his father's business. When Cuthbert waltzed into the main entrance sporting an array of discount impossibly luxurious vehicles, he took in the air and smelled the luxury new car smell along with the perfume like air freshener filling up the room. He noticed a sheik in white garb sitting quietly at a couch by the doors to the hallway and offices where Aiden was. An attendant approached Cuthbert and said, "Hello sir, we're about to close, but if I can help you for a last-minute rental, I'm sure we can work something out." She looked at Cuthbert with a flared grin, eyeing up a last-minute sale, trying to give off a flirty aura to sway Cuthbert quickly before he quickly replied, "No sorry love, I need to see Aiden in the back, it's important. I'm a friend of his father's." The woman's face quickly turned to concern and she asked, "You need to see Aiden?" "Oh right." She eyed Cuthbert's outfit, his high-end polo, and due to that seemed to assess he must not have been lying. "Right, of course. Is everything all right? Something happen?" Cuthbert stared at her dead-eyed for a moment and then took a solemn tone and said, "Yes, his mother has passed." "Terrible." The woman was shocked. "What? How? What happened?" Cuthbert purses his lips and nodded, finding an answer: overdose. "Such an awful affliction." The woman was even more taken aback and shrieked louder, "What? Oh my God. How? I didn't know she. Oh God." Cuthbert put his hand on her shoulder, consoling her. "It'll be all right, love. She's in a better place." "Aiden's just back there yet?" "In that back room." The woman was now bawling, standing in place in front of Cuthbert. Clearly she knew Aiden's mother somehow. "Yeah. No, yeah, it's the last door on the right, go ahead." "How could this happen?" "She's a preschool teacher." Cuthbert patted her shoulder and she clutched onto him in grief, crying, and he rubbed her back, consoling, and said, "Such misfortune. Oh, why must we live in such a cruel world?" The woman brought her head out from Cuthbert's chest, smiling through tears at his sentiment. "You're a good man," and she let go and walked him to the hallway. "Just that door there," she said, holding back tears, and returned to her chair at the desk at the end of the showroom, bawling. The sheik was observing the situation suspiciously, unsure what was happening. He looked at Cuthbert through the hallway, somewhat scowling. Cuthbert looked over, gave a polite smile, and looked into the room through the door window to see Aiden in a meeting with two more sheiks, looking through some sort of catalog they had brought, filled with passport-type photos of various women. It looked like Aiden was trying to decide or barter with the sheiks. Cuthbert hid by the window and put his ear to the door to listen into the meeting. "Yeah, Malakai's picky. They gotta be tip-top health, second trimester," said the younger Aiden's voice. The sheik replied in a deep Middle Eastern accent, "We are aware of Malakai's requirements. Allahu Akbar, these are exactly what he wants. Do not worry." "Okay, great. This is my first assignment for this client, but if he needs a dozen progressively more pregnant women, so be it. Do you know what he uses them for?" "I'm just curious, it's an odd request," asked Aiden. Cuthbert continued hugging the wall by the door. The two sheiks chuckled a low, dark, and sinister laugh and told Aiden, "The man has a particular diet, we help provide." They looked into Aiden's eyes, who was trying not to shit himself and laughing along to the cryptic statement, "Okay, we go. You take them all, yes?" Aiden cleared his throat and gulped, replying, "Sounds good, fellas, of course. See yourselves out." Cuthbert ducked to the back corner of the hallway as the two sheiks exited the room and went back to the showroom, where the attendant had stopped crying, and asked them if they needed anything. Cuthbert slipped into Aiden's office very quietly. Aiden didn't notice Cuthbert as he was frantically cutting up lines of coke on the desk, trying to make himself less nervous after the interaction. Cuthbert quietly walked and stood behind Aiden. As he went in to do a rail, Aiden snorted one big line and swung his head up, feeling its effects as his head went up. Cuthbert grabbed it like a basketball and smashed it into his desk and pile of coke. Aiden instantly blacked out, and Cuthbert began looking through the folders and folders of women's photos who'd been captured. He went through Aiden's drawers as Aiden was slumped over his desk, mumbling slightly, and found a dossier in a book of files deep at the back, clearly trying to be kept hidden, reading Malachi Top Secret. Cuthbert looked through the dossier and it held long lists of names and the diets they'd been kept on, alongside where they'd been extracted from and how far through their pregnancy they were. At the back of the dossier was a file with faces and names crossed out, and in red each of them read either consumed or used or defective. Cuthbert looked through the notes in the defective column's names. It looked like these were Malachi's slaves who managed to resist enough to not have their offspring devoured, purposefully giving themselves stillbirths in spite of Malachi and fighting him at every turn. Cuthbert smirked and then felt a cold shiver go down his spine. The dossier read Containment Unit MM23 at the top of each page. He knew where this was. Malachi's mansion. It was also an agency outpost in the past, and he would regularly be sent there to monitor prisoners back before he managed to cut most of his ties apart from those to Malachi's and Winston to the agency. MM23 was the containment cell in the basement reserved for human experimentation. It was designed to keep those in it highly physically healthy but incapable of thought. "You sick fuck," Cuthbert said to himself, "you really need to desecrate the most holy. You really believe that eating babies is gonna fun." Ugh. At that moment Aiden began to stir and regain consciousness. He hadn't seen Cuthbert walk in earlier when he'd smashed his head into the desk and was immediately confronted by him slamming the Malachi dossier onto the desk in front of him and Cuthbert saying, You got some explaining to do, son. Cuthbert took on the tone of an agency or AGO official. The flood of memory of MM23 gave him a surge of agency energy back into his veins, and he knew just how to do exactly what he'd planned to do on this contract. Not uncover Malachi, but squeeze as much money as he could put of it. Aiden was incredibly flustered, unsure of what had just happened. One minute he was about to do some lines to celebrate a deal gone well and calm his nerves as to what he was trading in and with who. The next, black, and now this man was towering over his desk, waving the evidence of his misdeeds in his face. I don't know what that is, Jesus. You got me mixed up. What is that? You don't think it has something to do with me, do you? Said Aiden, desperately trying to weasel his way out of guilt. It was in your drawer, son, come on. Cuthbert eyed Aiden sternly. Aiden was petrified. Relax, kid, said Cuthbert as he grabbed a pack of cigarettes from his polo pocket and lit two, handing one to Aiden, who shakily took it in his hand and started sheepishly drawing at it. Now in ASIO. In the agency. We have special ways of dealing with this sort of thing. Your punishment is going to be plain and simple. Cuthberts took a long drag of his cigarette and blew a plume of smoke into Aiden's face. Cuthbert paused. Aiden was waiting desperately for an answer. WH what? He eventually let out through his bloodied broken nose, bankruptcy. Said Cuthbert firmly. Aiden was taken aback. The two were still sharing a cigarette, about halfway through their darts now. If you want to be clean of this nonsense and not be brought to a bloody UN trial for your crimes against humanity, you're gonna have to empty all your bank accounts, every cent from this business, anything worth money liquidated, and transfer it into this account. Cuthbert showed Aiden his bank account details. It had no name of anything linking it to Cuthbert, so Aiden assumed it must be some sort of government fund. Aiden paused, taking the request in, and then quickly remembered what he'd been doing and what would happen if it got out, and quickly changed his vibe to saying, "Of course, sir. Right away, sir," and grabbed the phone and his phone in each hand, methodically emptying everything he had from all of his accounts except one that was partly owned by his father. Cuthbert remained standing over Aiden, stoic, taking drags of his cigarette as Aiden did the deed. "Okay, done," said Aiden. "Is that everything?" asked Cuthbert. There was a pause. "Well, not quite, but everything," said Cuthbert with authority, and Aiden quickly emptied his and his dad's joint account into Cuthbert's bank account also. The ember of the cigarette Aiden had been holding reached his fingers and burned him, and he dropped the butt on the desk. "Ow." He let out, "So I'm good, right? Everything's sorted, it's all clean now, right?" And then looked up hopefully at Cuthbert, who took one more big drag from his cigarette, smoking through the filter, and butted it into the desk. "Right," he replied, and Aiden took a huge sign of relief and hung his head towards the desk, and then, bang! Cuthbert shot a single shot through the back of Aiden's temple, which was followed by a scream from the attendant. Part 34. Cuthbert and Winston Agency Operations 1. The briefing room was not too large, but just enough to be intimidating. It had no windows, and every corner and crack of it was sealed with plain white linoleum, even the ceiling. The air inside was dead and acrid, and the only thing inside this room was a large whiteboard part computer interface at the front of the room, and multiple stacks of old used white school chairs sitting at the back of the room, most cracked or breaking apart. Cuthbert and Winston were sat at the middle of the room with one other agency recruit, an initiate, who was looking too eager and dumb to get very far here. Winston turned to Cuthbert. The two were sat together a few feet from the initiate, differentiating themselves as somewhat seasoned operatives. "How long you give the new guy?" Winston asked Cuthbert, who was staring dead ahead waiting for their handler to enter the room. "Fuck him," he replied bluntly, and Winston snickered slightly, looking over at the start-eyed recruit just slightly as he looked back, too innocent in his eyes. The lights were harsh and fluorescent, and ever so slightly in misrepair, flashing off occasionally quietly apart from a dull buzz. A woman entered the room, in a pitch-black pantsuit and sleek boots, with slicked-back black hair to the bottom of her neck, like Trinity from The Matrix. She walked with authority. Winston was quietly scared. He was around 30 at this point and had been in several briefings with this woman who named herself Minerva, but he couldn't shake the dread he felt with her in the room, not yet. Cuthbert stared dead ahead, almost looking into her dark black eyes, but being sure not to. Cuthbert had been in this agency now since his teens, orchestrating various missions for the agency. Winston had been assigned to keep an eye on him. He had been in the agency longer, at least by a decade, but wasn't the same tier of operator Cuthbert had proved himself to be, at least not yet. Minerva began to speak. Squad CW/P17, your upcoming mission is as follows. Minerva tapped on the whiteboard computer interface and a hologram of a rural village, torn apart, appeared in a huge map on the linoleum ground, filling the space between the three. The initiate nervously picked his chair up and brought it next to Winston and Cuthbert, by the hologram of a destroyed primitive village. The initiate whispered to Winston, who looked back over at the initiate, mouth agape at his audacity to speak at all during the briefing. Hey. I'm Peter. Cuthbert took no notice, staring dead ahead into the hologram, starting to study it. Winston didn't reply either, simply chortled slightly until Minerva came cracking in, berating Peter for his slight whisper. Silence is mandatory during your briefing, initiate. Peter looked up quickly, suddenly sweating bullets. He'd been calm, too carefree until this moment. "All right," he said, looking directly now at Minerva. "Silence," barked Minerva back at his response. "You'll be sure to remember that," she said, now scowling at Peter. A crooked grin appeared on Cuthbert's face, and Winston was almost holding back laughter at Peter's ignorance. There was a brief silence between the four as Minerva took time to eye down Peter the initiate, then she continued. "This is another holy light experiment's evidence extraction. Danger level is likely minimal aside from iridescence exposure, which you will be shielded from with your supplied hazard wear. Removal of your hazard wear may lead to cell breakdown and sudden death and is highly ill-advised. The agency requires organic human samples with traces of holy light residue, or iridescent interference, with human tissue to be brought back to headquarters for further analysis." Minerva began manipulating the whiteboard computer interface with her hand to show red ones in the decaying run-down village hologram. At that moment Peter the initiate decided to pipe up again. "What are the holy light experiments?" "Sorry, I'm new." Minerva scowled at him, saying nothing for a good 5 seconds. Cuthbert let out a satisfied exhale and Winston sighed and hung his head. Minerva then pulled a large agency standard pistol from her pantsuit and let out a single loud 50 caliber shot, directly through Peter's bewildered, unaware forehead. His head was erupted onto the linoleum behind him, covering the stark white, shiny linoleum with bone fragments and brain matter. "Silence. I demand silence during briefings." Minerva let out in frustration to the corpse, now slumped and falling off the chair. Minerva composed herself, wiping down her hands on her pantsuit and putting her gun back away. "That's why I like you too," she said, her words oozing with power. Cuthbert nodded slightly and Winston gave a big smile to her, looking back and forth at her and the corpse, letting out small exhales through his nose, trying to cover his inner panic for amusement. Cuthbert didn't bother to look at the corpse, he'd been expecting this anyway. "Obedient," said Minerva, looking at the two and the corpse. Winston gulped as she looked into their eyes, maintaining his smile. Cuthbert looked dead ahead, awaiting orders. He was around 20 at this time. Minerva looked down at Cuthbert quickly, a twisted smile coming across her face. "Especially you, Bertie. Our own agency prodigy. There was another short pause and Cuthbert bowed his head somewhat and looked back directly at Minerva. Minerva continued, "You will be flown in by helicopter in 100 hours. Remember, your objective is to retrieve human tissue with holy light exposure, and if you come across any experiment living remnants or survivors, exterminate everyone immediately, no exceptions. Initiate Peter has proven useless, but this is estimated as a 3-man mission, so I'll bring on a senior operator to help you and make sure this goes through without a hitch. Dale will accompany you too," she said as she took a pager device off her belt and inputted some various directives into it to summon this Dale. Cuthbert and Winston both let off relieved sighs. Each of them liked Dale for different reasons. He was a senior operative, respected by the two, but also after Cuthbert's parents' death, he had acted as Cuthbert's guardian as he grew up in the agency as a small child and was the one to give him the news of his parents' demise. And he was also the only memory Cuthbert had of parental benevolence before he was sent to grow up with sadistic Malachi for the rest of his formative years when the agency had decided against housing a child, and when Malachi requested for Cuthbert to be put in his care personally. "Any questions?" "Dale is arriving shortly," Minerva said. There was another pause. "Likelihood of complication?" asked Cuthbert. Yeah, added Winston, mid to low. "But the holy light experiments have proven erratic. Unexpected complications have been known to occur with them. So along with your agency firearms you will be assigned automatic rifles and additional equipment of that nature in your helicopter. These experiments have been known to create, let's say, unexpected anomalies. We have lost some good operatives on other similar extraction mission. So be on your guard." "Right," replied Winston, wanting to know more but also being wary of trying to pry information. Cuthbert said nothing and simply continued studying the hologram. A few moments passed and Dale arrived. He was middle-aged with a kind wrinkled face. He had a swagger which seemed unnatural for this environment, but it also seemed as if he had earned it from years of service. "How you doing, young bloodfuckers?" Dale said loudly, booming through the room as he patted Minerva on the back what seemed a little too hard and said, "Evening, Minerva, or morning. I don't know. You know it's so hard to tell in this fucking building, huh?" He began chuckling as he walked to the back of the room and grabbed a half-broken white school chair and planted it next to Cuthbert, who had taken on a slight comforted smile since Dale entered the room. "Hello, Dale," replied Minerva, a little annoyed but clearly used to his energy. Dale turned to Cuthbert regarding the hologram on the ground, taking on the tone of something like a beloved camp counselor, and Cuthbert seemed to melt his tough exterior just a little in his presence, which Winston always took note of with a raised eyebrow. "Village is it?" asked Dale to Cuthbert, sounding enthusiastic. "Extraction," replied Cuthbert simply but seeming
Carbon
more
is
calm
snobbery,
now.
properly
Holy light
right, just to me,
experiments,
obviously,
he
not
added.
just for kosher meat.
These ones
Sovereignties,
are like
ovary,
lucky
sober me,
days,
overseas,
replied
solo
Dale
G's, just to beef with your
Winston
economy.
turned to
Copping
him.
all these sloppy gobbies, and I'm so
Now,
confused.
what's
Loco
this?
G's, and I'm Socrates.
He
Obviously,
asked Dale.
enemies, office
Dale
please,
laughed
try to
over
corroborate my
and said,
steeds and my
"No,
trees.
don't
Barocki and
worry,
Oganese, G's,
we'll see
Louise.
when we get
Vibe
there."
going on freeze. Damn, just
"Right,"
these.
replied
Get
Winston,
fucked, Shrek. Come on,
unsatisfied.
shut up, cunt,
Briefing
G's.
concluded.
Get out of my
Barnes,
bees.
Minerva,
Get out of my
who
trap.
reshuffled
Get
out
up
of
from
the
my
room,
bleed.
leaving
Get out
behind
of
the
my
corpse
wap.
of Peter
Ain't
the
getting them
initiate.
from me, and ain't got
Before
nothing on my
closing the
wax.
door
And
behind
none of
them,
that's of it,
Minerva
man,
yelled
that's a
out,
fact that I got
"Clean
on
up,"
crack. And I'm
Gus
shooting your
Oki
max bill
quickly
right off
appeared
your
out
back,
of
and I ain't
nowhere,
trying to
heading
acting
eyes
hard and
went
I'm just
into the
stating
room
the
to
fact.
deal with
I'm here and
Peter's
I'm trying to
body.
go and push you right off the map.
The three
We hard to
made their
believe
way
that
through
you're really
various
got that
hallways
correct.
and staircases all lined with white linoleum.
Sack like an
with
elephant,
stale
bust
air
in the
and no
nuts in
windows,
Savannah, and
emerged
pull
to
like
a
an obelisk,
helicopter
navigating
pad where a
planets like a diorama.
military-style chopper was
Banish a
beginning
Helen, kill
to
a
land.
bitch, cause that bitch
"Full
got
blood
judo
balls,"
worship like she
said
can't worship the
Minerva to
bitch.
the three
She
as
worship, no cracking, no tension, rags hector to look at the macro. Can't mark up to my glow, can't even get fractions. I left the power room with a paint page, the power pill, and what happened to drop inside? Bitch, I'm using a candle, the vandal, your man in a bando, so random already. No, like I'm so raving. I'm Sandman with bands, and I'm slaking your ass with abandoned in taverns. I'm average, I'm savage, I'm controlling your mind like I'm David Miscavige, and I'm in this unauthorized fast. And we're all gonna take our lives living together, and we're gonna all meet on Mars. But I ain't gonna tell you that, I already in heaven when I'm in the top booty star. I'm stepping on pressure, we need to break into a Tesla and try to hotwire an electric car. I could die just like a honorary reverend injecting heroin. I made it and did the wrong band with too much my talk. I made it with straight up a trigger, I bought my degree of shooting star. I make these signals for my man to get onto with your email and seal your capital. I'm so used to doing the crystal, I can't even feel that at all. I'm not even violent, I can't even handle myself in a mental state at all. I'm stuck in shooting crystal, and I'm sucking like a pistol. And until I get tolerance, I can't hack the government itself. Paying my rent, cause I ain't paying a single goddamn cent. Every car get robbed, yeah, I'm still going to keep this up. This ain't really serious, you're broken in the
near some half-burned huts. The ground was covered in a lilac purplish almost thick pus-like substance spreading across the huts and ground in long veins, and the air was thick with fumes. The operatives hospital-style suits kept them protected from the stench. The chopper began to land on a hill just above the burnt village, the blades spinning causing the long grass underneath to fly around wildly as it lowered to the ground. The blades of the chopper were still spinning. Dale stepped out first, jumping out of the cockpit onto the grass after saying, "Let's go, boys." Cuthbert followed silent and Winston came close behind and barked into his hazmat suit radio. Back to agency operations
in remembering
headquarters
this and thinking to himself that Otto
jumped
must
and
have been around
landed
the
on
same
the
age
grass
as this
next
contract,
to Dale and
Lumiere
Cuthbert.
still filled the needle
"Let's
with the
check
super
it
mega
out,"
death
said
solution,
Dale,
but to be
waving
sure,
Cuthbert and
like last
Winston
time he
over
brought a
with his
pistol,
quad
but thought to
AH-12.
himself, if he's going to die,
"I'll
he
take the
deserves as
back
much
end.
agency he can
You and
have,
Cuthbert
regardless
take
how
the
much he
front,
wanted
we'll
it."
meet in the
Lumiere
middle.
was still facilitating
Winston
him leaving his
stated,
body
and
forever,
Dale looked at
so
Winston
Lumiere lined the side
strangely
of
as
his
if
trench
there
coat
was
with
something
pistols
being
with bits of
unsaid,
string
and
tying them
Cuthbert
to
took slight
the
notice
lining,
but was
at least
focused
20.
on scoping
That'll
the
do
terrain.
it, Lumiere remarked to
Dale
himself,
began to laugh a
appreciating his
weirdly
handiwork.
deep,
The sky
strange
was a deep
guttural
murky
laugh,
purple with the sun
gave
not being
Winston
close
a
to
sly
showing its
wink,
face but also
which
no so far
Cuthbert
to
did
not affect the
notice and
sky
had
to
a
not be a
perplexed
shiny
look
pitch
on
black.
his face
As
from
Kimmy
it.
tore the red Dodge
"Alrighty
Charger
then,"
down the red dirt roads,
exclaimed
with
Dale,
the
"come
Mandem
on,
by
Bert.
top 5 blasting
We'll
through his
check out
speakers.
the church."
He'd check his phone to see
He
his
said,
distance.
"Let's go,"
This was a lot further than
said
Wendy's old
Cuthbert.
grow house, but it felt part of the
The
same
two and
ranges.
Winston
Kimmy
split
realized
up,
he'd have to go
trudging
off-road the
through
last
the
few
lilac
kilometers.
pus
The
spread
contract
all
only
over the
specified
ground
4
in veins
targets,
and
but Kimmy
puddles
didn't
into
know
a
how
thick
many there'd
mist
actually
like
be.
massive
But he
clouds
saw some
bobbing
smoke
above the
coming from what
ground.
must have been a building in a patch of dense trees. Kimmy got out of the car and unpacked his drone, and set it onto the dusty road, where he'd reached a locked gate connected to an impossibly long what looked like military-style or issued electrified fence. The drone turned on and buzzed up into the air after Kimmy hosted a Silence 38 caliber pistol on the gun mount. Kimmy's adrenaline was up. If he couldn't take them all out with this, he'd need to drive through the gate to take the rest out, and Kimmy really didn't want that. Even if he could save the slaves, the contract described them as completely lobotomized. So what? DB the point? Kimmy wasn't why throwing himself into danger unnecessarily. Unfortunately, the tree were dense where Kimmy was controlling the drone through the camera input on his phone, and was cutting in and out. As he went through the brush, the camera arrived at a huge log cabin where he saw guards with automatic rifles. One of them pointed the drone out, peering out from the trees, a hippie, but a more militarized kind. His dreads and flowy clothes flowing seamlessly with his Kevlar and rogue militia were said, "Hey, what the fuck is that?" Pointing out the drone. Fuck. Kimmy exclaimed to himself a good 2.5 kilometers away by the lock gate. Kimmy maneuvered the drone to rush the hippie who saw the drone and pop him through his Oakleys. Kimmy focused and the screen flashed in and out, but he whooshed the drone towards the dumbfounded hippie, and was successful, but it was too late. His drone wasn't undercover anymore. Too much adrenaline was flowing through Kimmy to take this into account, and he couldn't let himself fail a contract and perhaps get flagged by the app, which he didn't want to know what meant. Kimmy directly ascended the drone thinking that would bring him out of view. It clambered past tall branches and leaves through choppy vision on Kimmy's phone, but it was too late. Kimmy heard an "I got it" through his phone speaker, followed by a spray of rounds with the drone falling down and then quickly losing signal as Kimmy watched it get picked up by an angry-looking perplexed dirty hippie before going dark. "Fuck say cunt." What? Kimmy exclaimed. This was the first occasion the drone hadn't worked. A couple of minutes passed and Kimmy was assessing the situation until he heard the loud vroom of multiple vehicles burning towards him from where the smoke was. Panic hit Kimmy's spine in a wave as he heard the cars, and began jolting when he noticed the gate automatically opening. Oh fuck, he stammered to himself as he climbed into the Dodge Charger as quick as possible.
Which is good for him because he can be at clubs till closing.
Blasphemy, final witness, Zero Lumiere doesn't sleep. Blasphemy, final witness, Zero Lumiere doesn't sleep.
I am D.D. Montclair.
Kill 'em all, kill 'em all, kill 'em all. Kill 'em all, kill 'em all, kill 'em all. Kill 'em all, kill 'em all, kill 'em all.
Montclair Dee is he be she kill take them, kill them, kill them. Montclair Dee is he be she kill take them, kill them, kill them.
Manifold benefits accruing interest in dissident infantically obsolescent maintenance services.
D. Montclair, shade of red wine, vinegar and water. No ozone generator for generating the petite manifestation. D. Montclair, shade of red wine, vinegar and water. No ozone generator for generating the petite manifestation.
and death. I am. Which what you will have it be. Breath in. I cannot test. And